You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
And I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance. You know what I mean?
You don't just walk onto a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You've got to start at the bottom.
I know, that's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start.
みんなに報告しなきゃいけないことがあります。ミワちゃんは今日でチャムを卒業します。
So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest king of comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
We are going classic Cohen mode and the Canadian dad version of it, I guess. I don't know. Josh will enlighten you guys later. Join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for coming up on our 5th year of bonus episodes. There's something like 100 of them waiting for you, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre movies. So if you haven't done that yet...
Again?
Yes, I mean, we after the best genre films of 2021 being almost 4 hours long, I think we needed a break from the bonus transmissions, but they are coming back soon. I do want to check out that new Scream, and there's some other stuff coming out I'm interested in. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if that interests you at all. And speaking of which, we did have quite a few people make the jump this week.
Nice.
So we'll give them their shout outs here. We had Brad Avery. We had Zoid Wheeler. We had Jordan Winnie. We had Kian O'Brien sign up at the $10 a month rate, joining us for the virtual screenings that we do at the end of each month for the $10 patrons.
Fun.
We had David English sign up, as well as Alina Gobel. So thanks so much to you folks for signing up, and I hope you guys are enjoying all of those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know that you are. I see you right now listening on Apple Podcasts. Scroll down to the very bottom, give us a good old rating and review down there. It helps us climb the ranks over at iTunes and find new listeners. And the very last plug is merch. If you guys like the poster art that local horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that basically put on anything you want. A shirt, a hoodie, a pillow, a notebook, anything you can think of. You can probably get the Sleazoids logo on it, or you can just get a straight up poster like Jamie and I both have hanging up in our place.
Looks good.
The link to that is in the description and also at sleazoidspodcast.com. That is the intro. Welcome back, folks, to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us on the main feed, and we would have been doing another gargantuan episode following up our huge best movies of 2021 with an episode we knew was going to be big because it was a big old triple feature episode, and every single movie we covered, unlike some of the other ones we like to do on the show, they were each like 2 hours long, you know, versus like the 90-minute bangers we get to cover a lot of the time on the show.
Love those.
And that was because there was a new Scream film out, so we decided it would be a great time to go back and talk about Wes Craven's metafictional slasher franchise Scream. We talked about the original film from 1996, Scream 2 from 1997, and Scream 3 from the year 2000. We unfortunately did cut short of Scream 4 from 2011 just because it doesn't really meet the cutoff point of where we kind of... we haven't talked about a 2010s movie on this show other than in the bonus transmission series, so we kind of avoid it. But all 4 films are very good films, and Jamie and I went guestless for it so we could have a really in-depth talk about those 3 films. So if you like Wes Craven, if you like slasher films, what are you doing? Check out the main feed 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then last week... For the bonus listeners over on the Patreon, because we have been talking about so many kind of really big sort of canon movies recently, we talked Die Hard, we talked Scream, we said we need to throw in a real grindhouse gutter trash nonsense double feature, and that was what we did, where we finally talked about the combination of one, a Baptist minister by the name of Estes Washington Perkle from Mississippi, and Ron Ormond, a vaudeville magician turned exploitation filmmaker. The unholy combination of these two men resulting in some of the most disturbingly gruesome, explicit, and graphic Christian propaganda films that you've ever seen coming out in the 1970s. We talked about If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do?, as well as The Burning Hell. The first film is all about the idea of a potential communist takeover of America that's going to happen in exactly 1973, according to Estes Perkle. Yes, that movie includes Castro-looking foot soldiers shoving bamboo sticks into children's brains until they vomit. And then The Burning Hell from 1974 is their depiction of a hell as not as the symbolic idea of punishment, but this very literal physical place that exists and you are going to go to if you don't believe. Both films were designed to show to 7-year-olds to scare them into running to Jesus and to becoming insane right-wing freaks. So if that interests you at all, Jamie and I had a lot of fun talking about 70s in Christian propaganda that's incredibly disturbing and violent and was shown literally to children in the 1970s. It's insane.
Yeah, it went on tour, basically.
Yes. 16 millimeter reels from church to church. Patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast once again, if that episode interests you at all. That was last week's bonus episode. But finally, moving on to this week, we have a really big episode with a guest that we've been meaning to have on for a while. Many of you will know them by their Twitter handle, Sriracha Chau. But the special guest joining us this week and bringing us a insane double feature that I'm really excited to talk about is Michael. Michael, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me on here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Now, Michael, as it goes on this show, we have the guests bring the double features with them. So what two films have you brought with you this week, and why did you pair them together?
So I brought The King of Comedy and Perfect Blue. I think they're both just like really great movies about like identity and fame, the relationship between like celebrities and like the audience you have. But it feels like cliche to say now, but like I feel like they're both like really prescient about the way like we present ourselves like in the world and like how everyone's like now trying to find like some level of fame. I think they're just like really interesting movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that they paired really well together because I had only seen King of Comedy previously, but I've been meaning to get to Perfect Blue for a while, so it was a good excuse to finally knock it off my watch list. But I was definitely, when I finally watched Perfect Blue, I was like, this has a lot of the same disturbing point of view of like fantasy and reality being dangerously kind of blurred together, which I think is really cool. But both filmmakers definitely took very different stylistic methods of kind of, broaching this subject of the idea of a media consumer becoming more involved in the real lives of the things that they consume on their screens. King of Comedy, obviously, Martin Scorsese, 1982, and Perfect Blue, 1997, correct, right? Satoshi Kon.
Yeah.
So either way, very, very interesting to see sort of like two different filmmakers take two different styles to similar subject matter. But yeah, that being said, I think we should jump right into it here. Let's get into chronologically The King of Comedy.
Is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Oh, Jerry, I love this guy. Always coming up with these great lines. I love him.
Nobody can remember his name.
Mr. Pipkin. Mr. Pupnik.
Mr. Puffer.
Rupert.
Pupkin, Pupkin.
But by 11:30 tonight, the whole world will know that Rupert Pupkin is the new King of Comedy. Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, in a Martin Scorsese picture. The King of Comedy.
All right, we are talking The King of Comedy, the 1982 American satirical black comedy thriller drama film, all over the place, directed by one Martin Scorsese, and obviously starring Robert De Niro in what was their 5th collaboration together at the point of making this film, and also co-starring the legendary Jerry Lewis and Sandra Bernhard. This film, I'm assuming most people are going to be familiar because we are talking about a pretty big filmmaker this week. We're talking about Martin Scorsese. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this film, especially now because it has been sort of pretty much reclaimed as one of his greatest films, despite the fact that it kind of got a bit of a tepid response on release and definitely bombed financially. And I think Scorsese and De Niro were kind of both hurt by that around the time that the film came out, which is, kind of unfortunate. But if there's anyone out there who listens to this podcast and hasn't seen The King of Comedy, Robert De Niro is playing a character by the name of Rupert Pupkin, and he is a aspiring stand-up comedian / late night television host who is on his grind set. He's got that money mindset, and he is attempting to achieve success in show business by, instead of making his way up from the bottom, playing clubs, getting a tape together, he has decided to take the approach of just stalking his idol, one Jerry Langford, played by the legendary comedian and filmmaker Jerry Lewis. And this obviously gets into, this is a movie that deals a lot in sort of what's kind of happening in the details of it. I actually read that Scorsese originally kind of turned it down because the way that he saw it is that the film kind of had like one gag originally when he looked at it. And he was like, yeah, so a fan just kidnaps his idol like that. When people were reading the screenplay, that's kind of how they were looking at it. But I think De Niro, being De Niro, he saw it as a showcase for the performance, and he saw that the performance would take control of the film. The detail of the performance would engage people further than what you could just see on the page. And De Niro himself actually bought the screenplay to this film directly from the guy who wrote it, the film critic Paul D. Zimmerman, who was obviously inspired at the time. I think he wrote it in like the 70s. He wrote it like almost a full decade before this came out. And he was inspired actually by Johnny Carson and the autograph hunters who were pursuing him. And he wrote the story that tackled late night TV and stand-up comedy, but also, celebrity culture and the media industry at large in America. And this idea of kind of like isolated viewers who have dreams of, being part of the things that they consume, and seeing it, I think at one point, as Jerry Lewis says, like sometimes people watch what we do and they see how relaxed and funny we are, and they think that, we're not putting work in, that this is just something that anyone could just get up and do. But yeah, this film came out. Came out right after Raging Bull, right? I think they had. I think De Niro and him had just finished that together. Obviously, one of their most acclaimed films, got tons of Oscars.
I was reading that apparently Scorsese wasn't interested before, but after Raging Bull, he started becoming kind of a name, and people started recognizing him. And that's when he started really connecting with that script.
Yeah, that it was a question of he didn't really get it before in the 70s, because when De Niro first brought it to him, it was 1974. He had just done, I think, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And that was around the time that he denied it and said, I don't really think that that's the next one for me. And I think De Niro at one point, he had to take it to Michael Cimino, who did The Deer Hunter with De Niro, but he was too busy on the obviously absurdly over budget Heaven's Gate shoot that he was doing at the time. And then I think De Niro also took it to Bob Fosse at one point, which is an interesting name. And I do wonder what the movie would have looked like, because obviously he had just finished All That Jazz around the time that he had finished it, which obviously has some really dark industry elements and critique to it.
And he ended up doing Star 80 instead, I think. Right?
Yes, he ended up doing Star 80 instead.
Yeah.
But it eventually landed back with Scorsese, who had his interest rekindled, as Michael mentioned, obviously due to some of the alienation he felt himself from his own growing celebrity status, as his, as he was being more sort of recognized as a filmmaker and getting more acclaim. And also, I think he did eventually at one point start finally connecting a little bit with De Niro, describing it as, he's like, it's a really mean, cynical movie, but ultimately this is about a struggling artist in a way.
Yeah.
And so when De Niro kind of clarified that for him, they started putting some things in there where they even have a little bit of sympathy for Pupkin. There's actually a part in the film where he's on the payphone, like hounding Jerry's office. And it's actually the same payphones that him and De Niro used to call producers from.
Oh, wow.
That's very cool.
So
I didn't know that.
And also De Niro partially was able to convince him because he said, look, this could be a New York movie, you know? So, you know, that's all Scorsese ultimately needs to hear. He's like, okay, it can be a New York movie.
Is it like at all connected to like, because I know for like Taxi Driver, like Jodie Foster had John Hinckley, right? Is that at all connected at all to that?
I mean, I'd have to imagine that definitely had them, you know, thinking about the material, because it's definitely something I thought about watching it. Like Jamie, I'm sure you've heard of that. The guy who tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan because he watched Taxi Driver and wanted to impress Jodie Foster. So that had already happened at this point, I believe. They had also at not long after this, they would have also had the guy who got like John Lennon's autograph and also killed him.
Oh yeah.
So there was definitely this, you know, since Zinnemann wrote it in the 70s into the early 80s, this had just become more of a subject. You know, there was definitely a climate of people, you know, finally, you know, starting to see the distance closing between the sort of, you know, the audience and the things that they are actually consuming. And I think Zinnemann said that part of the reason he felt it failed was that because the tone that they're walking kind of confused the studio, that they were like, there is a real sense of danger from the fact that people know people, you know, they've heard of people like this before, and they know that they've actually tried to assassinate people, even if it's not something that Pupkin actually does in the film. Everyone's sitting there waiting for him to go Travis Bickle mode.
Yeah. And you're not like there's so many points where, you know, his delusions are brought up that at a certain point you're not quite sure if he is going to be willing to kill, and so there is kind of that suspense throughout the climax. Like once eventually he gets what he wants, and we'll get into it with more detail. I definitely, you know, trust him a little more, but there is a moment at least where I feel like he might do this.
Yeah, no, there's definitely sort of this idea of, you know, we are kind of strapped in to the sort of you know, the pathological single-minded pursuit that he's on.
Yes.
And you do have a sense of ambiguity about like what the limitations of that are. You know, there is something scary about it, even if, you know, it doesn't reach the sort of operatic extremes that, you know, and violent extremes that Taxi Driver does. And that was actually part of something that people, what kind of, I think, resulted in the tepid reaction. I was reading some of the early reviews, like Pauline Kael straight up had a negative review. Roger Ebert had one of the few positive reviews. And even it was kind of like, I found the movie like frustrating and kind of anticlimactic, and you know, there was some, I can't remember exactly the word that he used. I think he just said that you know, that you were watching lonely people make decisions knowing that they were going to result in bad things, and then the release never actually comes. And I think the wording that he used was that the movie feels like one long postponement of pain. And so the overall feeling was that people kind of left the movie and just kind of had this general creepy, unpleasant, kind of irritated vibe, and that the movie was funny, but like never really delivered on the actual thriller elements. And the funniest thing kind of about this assessment is that I basically agree with them, but I find that it's what makes the movie interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like one of the ways I love the way he rides that kind of ironic line is the way he uses music. A lot of the music is very poppy and very happy. And like one instance is right in the introduction when Jerry Lewis, you know, he has a show, he does his whole monologue and all of that. He's established as like the man.
He's got the band, the guests, the curtains. Yeah.
And then he goes outside and, you know, he's just hounded by people. And he, it just shows the chaos and eventual somewhat violence as well that comes with it. And then what Scorsese does is just freezes Rupert's happy face while he's looking at, I believe it's was her name Martha?
Yeah,
Masha.
Masha, I think. Yeah,
Masha, yeah.
Who's in there trying to get Jerry's attention, and he just freeze frames it so that the opening credits can come on, and it's this very happy song that's kind of just very happy go lucky, and then he freezes
it's a very famous, actually, Ray Charles romantic ballad called Come Rain or Come Shine. And yes, it is very, sort of ironically juxtaposed with this terrifying freeze frame of this woman's hands and the flash of the camera and De Niro's face kind of like just out of focus.
Yeah, and I love the way that he freeze frames it, has the entire opening credits go on just this one shot, and then he goes right back into the chaos. He takes away the music, and then you're just right back with the cameras and the screaming and Jerry trying to get through to his car, and it's a great way to introduce, I think, the odd tone that he is going to bring you throughout the entirety of the movie.
Definitely. Well, and also, again, like Scorsese's doing something really interesting with some of the sort of stylistic expressions here, and De Niro is on I don't know what he's on. He's on
going
something.
For it. It's awesome.
Yeah, he went full method on this one. He was hunting down his own stalkers and having conversations and going to dinners
was he
with
really?
them.
I didn't know
yes.
that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh
well, because partially that was also how he convinced Scorsese. He was like, these are real people. Like, I get these people calling me. So the whole bit about the person getting Jerry's phone number and actually calling him up at his house, like that actually happened to him. So
there's also a really great moment where Jerry's just walking down the street and he signs an autograph for a woman, but he doesn't have the time to talk to her son, who I think is in the hospital, she says. And so he just starts walking down the street, and she says, like, I hope you get cancer or something like that.
Yeah.
And he says that actually happened to him while he was walking down the street and had to kind of brush somebody off. And he even directed her in that scene how to get the timing right and how she said it and all of that. So yeah, there's some wild examples in this movie.
Yeah, I love that sequence in particular because of just the way that it starts off very casual, where he's walking around New York City, the greatest city, and everyone's like, Jerry, you're the best. Yeah, you go, Jerry. And he's kind of like smiling and he's waving at them, and he's like, this is like the right amount of fan distance I need to be at. And then everyone's like actually running into him and talking to him and then trying to get his autograph and then handing him a payphone to talk to her dying son. He's like, okay, this is getting a little personal. And then at a certain point, it's one of the few like handheld moments in the film. He literally just starts like sweating and sprinting towards his office, like running away from people.
Yeah.
So that stuff's really fantastic. All the stuff that's getting in, like both De Niro and Jerry had themselves, gone through some of these experiences. So that stuff kind of feels like very authentic. And De Niro also, he studied a lot of stand-up comedians, both on live and TV. And his performance is one of just nonstop, desperate showmanship. He is like this walking, ham-fisted cliche of a comedian / talk show host, just waiting for the camera and crew and audience to follow along with him. But he does it all the time.
Yeah. In normal interactions, just and people down the street and whoever he interacts with business-wise and stuff like that.
Exactly. I think there's something so difficult to watch about his performance because, everything else around him is calibrated to be, fairly grounded, or at least grounded enough that it really accentuates how performative and animated his performance is. Mm-hmm. You can tell that he's having conversations that he's already rehearsed, like this hammy late night TV show host. Yeah. And you just know that everyone around him can sense the fakeness of it and the desperation of it, despite how much he's rehearsed it to try to be natural.
And how much he still has. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, that desperation like feels like uncomfortably real, like when you're trying to be like ambitious in like any field.
Yes,
definitely. Yeah,
I mean, I was gonna say, like, you know, Jamie does a lot of his own stuff in the industry. I you know, obviously did a little bit of work on some sets and stuff like that as well. And you know, there's definitely something very real and very crushing about the sort of constant series of rejections that he's facing.
Right.
And you know, on a certain level, you do go, yeah, it is kind of like unfair. You know, that this guy can't really seem to land his shot, but at the same time. You're also like, this guy's not all there.
Yeah, there are like so many scenes where he's like, kind of like it's gonna work out for him, and then he just goes like way too far.
Yeah, they were like, dude, like they're gonna listen to your tape, and they said, look, we'll give you some criticism. You know, like we didn't love all of your jokes, but you know, work on them a little bit. Get in a club, try them out in a live setting. You know, like actually workshop them a little bit. And then, you know, we will come watch you at a live show once you've workshopped them a little bit. Like that's such a, you know, a normal industry thing. And yes, it is very possible that they are just saying that to once again get rid of him and they don't actually mean it.
Yeah.
But like, you know, his response to real world rejection is with this very sort of like surface level corny greeting card kind of quality that he hits it back with.
Yeah.
And then combined with this, you know, this deep seated like compulsion and pathology of a sociopath that, you know, he's going to climb regardless of this rejection.
Yeah, there is like a point where he makes that tape, which I definitely want to get to that scene itself. But
yes.
When he does make the tape and give it to the secretary, there is a scene that seems actually somewhat genuine, which is where she gives it back to him and actually has a couple notes that are specific to the tape that was given to her. So I did like that. And it kind of correlates well with the ending, which we'll once again get to, where he performs and he does what seems to be very well. He seems to do a good job. So it would make sense that she would actually hear that tape, see some potential, but then also say what she says, which I think is reasonable, which is, you know, craft it, mold it a little better, and we'll come see you once you get a couple gigs. But he just has this sense of, it's that tunnel vision. He just has this sense of kind of like, he deserves like this already. Yeah, exactly. It's an entitlement. He deserves this already. And I think a perfect example of like two good examples of his delusions is right at the beginning too, where he comes up to all the people that are getting autographs, which are people he knows. He seems to be kind of friends with them in some strange way. And he says
they're like professional colleague because he used to be an autograph hunter,
like interesting, right? Where they're all just like trading like autographs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, anyone got a Rodney Dangerfield? I'll trade you for a Barbara or whatever. Yeah.
And he mentions that he's almost like above that now. But then later on when he brings Rita out on the date, he's just showing her like all the autographs that he has and saying that he's like personal friends with, I think, like Woody Allen or something like that.
Yes.
So just, and then...
Yeah, he also gifts her his autograph, being like, you'll want to hold on to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too. It's that confidence that he has as well, even though he's completely deluded. He does have a very focused confidence about him, where like right in the beginning where he jumps into the car with Jerry, for instance. And I can't believe Jerry doesn't just like kick him out right away. I mean, I'd be kind of frightened, to be honest.
Well, and it's funny. He immediately twists his arm on it, right? Because Jerry originally doesn't want to let him in. He's like, no, I can't set this precedent. I can't do this. And but De Niro,
I saved your life here.
Yeah, De Niro sees his moment early to very performative, be like, hey, back away from Jerry, get away from Jerry, like as if he's not one of the same people who's there for the And then he says to him, I don't mean to be rude, but I did put myself on the line for you, Jerry.
I think he even shows like a little bit of blood on his hand or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he gives this like well rehearsed, but obviously very rehearsed little spiel to Jerry. And one of the lines,
he's like, I think I'm ready. I just need my shot. Jerry.
Yeah, and I love when Jerry kind of reciprocates. It just says, okay, I'll give you like my secretary's number. You can get something set up or whatever. And when he asks,
he's like, go through proper channels process. You know, send in a tape, send in an audition. We'll look at you.
Yeah, and it's also kind of part of like the whole acting thing, the way that these people are still always acting in a way, because later we find out that he just reveals to him, he's like, I was just doing that to brush you off. He comes off as very nice, honestly, and sympathetic at first, Jerry, a lot of the time. And there's still a lot of moments. I mean, he is going through a very stressful situation. I definitely understand it.
And he meets like weirdos like that like all the time.
Yeah. But
that's just it. That's what's so interesting is that you can tell that Scorsese as a filmmaker, he both has a little bit of sympathy for the idea of, like an artist who just can't get their foot in the door. Yes. But he also has this sort of newfound sympathy for, sort of like this person who, kind of wishes that despite they think they've got what they want, they're kind of still not happy with it. There's still a level of, alienation and isolation that even Jerry feels. Like I think about that moment a lot, especially on repeat viewings of him just going home alone, trying to watch Pick Up on South Street. Which is a movie we've covered on this podcast.
Like the only like real interactions he has are with like these total weirdos. Otherwise, he's like totally alone in the world.
Yeah, and he's in this giant empty apartment that's very luxurious, but he just has like no one to talk to. He's got this big dinner table, and he's just got the one plate and glass, and it just feels lonely. It just feels completely empty.
Yeah, and there's something so interesting, too, about giving this performance to Jerry Lewis and obviously naming the character Jerry. Like, it has a little bit of sort of like a real-life quality to it, but also, there's something so interesting about, giving this actor who, is completely willing to get would be willing to get as animated as De Niro is, and giving him this very sad sort of straight man performance to that performance. And again, like watching him at home, trying to just enjoy Pick Up on South Street, another movie about desperate hustlers trying to make a living, and having just Masha call him on his home number. And, like he thinks he's home. He thinks he's safe. And he still can't escape. He's had one long night of just people just assaulting him over and over. And he tells one of them kindly, go through the proper channels, my producer will look at your tape, and all Rupert hears is, we're best friends now. And I'm on the show now. And I love to... De Niro's delivery of, do you know how many times I've had this conversation in my head? And Jerry did it always go this way? And he's like, yeah,
that confidence again. It's great.
Yeah, well, and that triggers what is sort of like the key sort of formal structure of the film, which is the series of sort of elaborate and obsessive fantasies that completely blend this very sort of, kind of more grounded, realistic style, even for Scorsese, with like these overt editing patterns that sort of cue you in on the fact that this isn't actually happening. But there's nothing in the actual sequencing or the way that it's shot to tell you that this isn't happening. And I read that Scorsese very intentionally did this because he wanted to sort of disorient the viewer at the point where this is a character where, reality and fantasy have so completely blurred that he was like, I wanted to make even the fantasy sequences kind of feel like possible in a sense, like in a way that the viewer could watch them for a minute and be like, oh, this is happening. He's going to dinner with Jerry now. He's best friends with Jerry now. But I love how in the writing and in the performances, it goes far enough that you can't believe it at a certain point. You're like, this is
Jerry's
ridiculous.
Never this nice.
Yeah, he's like, Rupert, I thank you for meeting me for lunch. I know you're a busy man. You're the most popular man. And De Niro, all humble, he's like, what are friends for, Jerry?
One of my favorite parts of like all of his delusions with Jerry is that he's always putting himself in a situation where Jerry needs him. So it's always this thing where he's just like, I have to get that spot on
someone
the
else
show,
is the desperate
time.
one.
Yeah, like, exactly. Only like 6 weeks, Rupert. And like, he's like, I can't even take control of my life for 6 weeks. What are you talking about?
He's so humble. He's so humble in the rehearsed versions.
It's great. And another thing that I love with the delusions is that he never, Scorsese never actually shows his mother but you hear her.
Oh yeah.
So there's something very cool about that where but it's always and it's always in a room where it's just him. So it's I would probably think at a certain point it's a delusion, especially because he starts hinting when he does his stand-up routine at the end
that she's like dead
about a few things. Yeah, exactly. But I just love that he uses something that's still kind of in the physical scene, a voice, to signify that it's like he's hearing something, but is it really there? And then you can kind of just be a part of that with the audience because he's actually physically putting the voice in there. So I really like that. I also think it's interesting, though, that he has a shot where, and I think it's the only one that seems more surreal than everything else, which is where it's kind of this like black and white photo of people laughing, and you hear the audience
a freeze-framed audience.
Yeah, and then you see him kind of in this like empty hallway that doesn't seem like it's actually a part of his house, and it feels like a tunnel vision kind of thing that he has going on. But besides that, I feel like most of the delusions and all of that are kind of mixed in with the reality of the scene, which is cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's definitely one of the few moments that I wrote down, like that incredible dolly shot of him performing to the fake audience, or some of the set design can get a little surreal sometimes, like the set that he's built of the cutouts with the TV show. Like it even has some of that like silent era sort of like angular shapes and the colors and everything. Like it almost looks like he's like set up like a Dr. Caligari talk show or something. So there's a couple moments where he allows himself kind of like these more sort of expressive or surreal design choices. But I will say, in comparison to something like Raging Bull, which had the camera in that film just has this really raw, expressive freedom to it. The style he opted for here is a lot more mannered and locked down.
It's like interesting. You don't have like the roaming camera that it usually like incorporates. It's like it's very locked down, as you're saying.
There's no bravura Goodfellas one take in this film. He definitely went. I want something where honestly, this feels like the film of him doing a lead character where he is actually trying to keep himself a little at a distance from the character. And I think it was in one to contradict the sort of erratic lead character. Just in the first place, but then also, I think keeping us at a distance from his impulsive psyche, I think does actually deliver a level of, disturbing ambiguity for me, which is that, you're just sitting here in the reality of his actions while they make you, laugh or cringe or uncomfortable or scared or whatever, like we don't get so swept up in his fantasy that we kind of tag along with him. We tag along enough through the choices that he makes because of the things going on in his head, which is just interesting because it separates him. I think intentionally, I think it was Scorsese probably just trying to separate himself a little bit from Taxi Driver, because there's a lot of obviously overt comparisons that you can make here between those two characters who have very similar but different sort of relationships with the idea of what is going on in their head versus what's actually going on in the sort of outer world. And they both definitely share a little bit of like nervous, unpredictable kind of tension, of this idea of, this very deranged headspace having control over the other characters that you're watching. And even if this film, I don't think has quite those, we've covered Taxi Driver, that film has some like really evil, menacing vibes to it this one, I think, pulls back from a little bit. But I think that's what's interesting is that somehow,
you almost think it's going to get there, but it doesn't.
Yeah, but Pupkin is a scary character without having to be, like fully as menacing.
Yeah.
There's something
that kind of determination can be scary.
Yeah, there's something kind of off-putting about that. It's more mundane than it is, sort of like the opera quality of Taxi Driver, and I think that really works for the film, especially. But yeah, one of my also favorite things that's happening in this film and has to always get a shout out every time we talk about Scorsese is that there's some really, really amazing cutting by Thelma Schoonmaker in this film that really accentuates the strangeness of some of the interactions he has or the alienations that the characters have. And one of my favorite moments is that first fantasy sequence that we were talking about where he's having lunch with Jerry. And it basically teaches you how to watch the rest of the film.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it's cutting between, this scene with Jerry where he is, Jerry's like, I got to go away for 6 weeks. You got to take over my show. I got no one else. I rely on you, Rupert. You got to take this show for me. He's like, oh, I can't do that. I can't, that's crazy. Okay, I'll do it, Jerry. Like that kind of thing. But the cutting is really interesting because it is a very, again, realistic conversation, shot not like any other scene that looks like it's actually happening in the film. But the thing that's cueing you into the fact that it's fantasy is the cutting, because all of a sudden, without missing a beat with the dialogue or the performance, it will cut to De Niro rehearsing the same conversation, the same lines that he's having. They don't repeat the lines. It's literally just like it'll cut from Jerry talking to him, and then it will cut to a completely different space. And obviously, where De Niro is imagining himself having this conversation. That's where you get some of the first interruptions where his mother's like, Rupert, who are you talking to? But I just love the way that the cutting between the dialogue is super sharp, super clean, to the point where the scene is happening to you, the viewer, all at once, but these two completely different spaces become indistinguishable to you. And that is sort of like, the key to the film. We have sort of entered his blurring of fantasy and reality at that point without having to go as crazy as, just showing you in the style that he's clearly, he's high in the sky. He's dreaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just what makes it sadder. Especially the elements with Rita, where Rita is someone who he grew up with and someone who he's kind of pursuing as a means to, I guess, prove people wrong. I think it was a friend of the pod, Will Sloan, wrote about this and compared it to the Travis Bickle idea of how he wants to sort of rescue Jodie Foster in that film. Right. But there's sort of an ulterior motive, psychological motive to him wanting to do that. It's not completely altruistic. And Will pointed out there's something similar happening here where he's really using Rita as a prop to impress Jerry and validate his own existence. Yeah. And as Will pointed out that, he wants to conquer her as a way of conquering, the classmates who ignored him, the teachers and parents who underestimated him, all of these things that, resulted in, his failure or not achieving his goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it seems like she was a popular girl back when he was in high school. Now it seems like she's given up on all of his dreams, and it seems like he wants to pull her up with him in this
Yes.
Yeah.
I just love how hilarious his pitch to doing that is. He's like, who's your favorite actress? Marilyn Monroe? Yeah. Well, she died tragically alone.
I was like, I
don't want to see that happen to you. Yeah.
Smooth moves.
Just such an odd way of framing that, even though, she can immediately tell, that he is, he's a bullshit artist. Yet he's saying, I'm going to live in a Hollywood mansion next year and I want you to live with me, Rita. I'm going to take you out of your shitty, lowly working girl life.
It's interesting too that he's doesn't seem to be into her sexually at all. She invites him up and he's not that into it. And I think when he gets to when he gets Jerry's, he's oh, we're gonna have 2 separate rooms. She's entirely just a symbol for him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's not really romantically interested in her. He's interested in her as another thing, as another goal. It's just
even in the fantasy, what's is it the principal or his teacher that marries him in that fantasy?
Yes, what a sequence. Where I can't remember exactly what it is that they say, and I'll probably come back to it when I find it in my notes somewhere here. But that sequence where and I love too that Scorsese recreates the full TV style, we're watching it on a shitty TV from back in the day, and they put on the show, and Jerry's you're my best friend, Rupert, and now we're gonna get you married on the show. He's oh my god, and your principal is here, and your principal here is marrying you, and he's saying, you know what, Pumpkin, we all underestimated you. We thought you were stupid, but it turns out that you were right the whole time, and you're a genius. And like,
and he even has the entire nation apologize and thank him for like all his greatness. It's incredible. He gets the entire country to worship him. It's an amazing sequence.
Yeah. Well, and I just love how by the time that we've hit that point, like it obviously it sounds so ridiculous, but it's not as like built into the film as ridiculous. It's built in as like, no, this is an achievable goal that he is going to meet once Jerry gives him the show spot in like a day, which he already promised to do by just saying his secretary would listen to his tape. So that stuff's all really fantastic. I love all the sequences of him alone in his set with the cardboard cutouts, putting on the versions of the show again, rehearsing these things that we eventually
like these
see
are
come
the
to
only
fruition.
people he's performed for, and it's just like fake. It's cardboard cutouts.
Yes, of Jerry and of like Marilyn Monroe, and I think Humphrey Bogart is one of the cutouts as well.
Nice. I think there's something.
So he's got taste.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's also something creepy about just when he's making that tape for the secretary or what he thinks is Jerry. Right in between the takes where he's just pressing the record button and stop and start or whatever, he's yelling at his maybe there, maybe not mother. And there's just also kind of a creepy factor to thinking of her listening to the tape and not really knowing what's being cut out in between those takes.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just him yelling at somebody in a room that isn't probably there. So I just thought that was an interesting little thought too.
Yeah, I mean, I also love how much detail is given to the way that he just controls social situations.
Yeah. He
like
is
I
good at
love
kind of persuading people to keep listening to him, which is something else.
Well, there's like that bit when he first brings the tape in, and he's like, Jerry and I. He goes up to the office. He's like, Jerry and I discussed me being on the show last night, and they're like, well, do you have like an appointment? Like, what do you want to do? And he's like, I'll wait in the lobby.
Yeah.
And I love that he's even like, he knows that people are looking at him, so he starts like performing interest in the ceiling. And he's like, is that cork? Is that cork? Yeah. I've heard that's good for sound, and I just love how every sort of realistic performance around him is just very polite and sort of patient with him, and his genius is being able to very pathetically, sort of like weaponize that politeness.
Yeah,
so
like it's
that,
all like a means to an end for him. Like as like a comedian, like he doesn't really care about like connecting with anybody, which is why he's like performing for like cardboard cutouts. He doesn't like care about anybody really.
Yeah,
well, he talks to real people the same way he talks to a cutout, right? Because that's just it. Is he's like, there's this vision of what they are going to respond because he's scripted it, and the whole movie is watching him deal with like actual people who aren't necessarily giving him the exacted scripted conversation that he imagined, even if they're perfectly nice people, like the executive producer's assistant who takes his tape, played by Shelley Hack, who we've talked about actually once before, Jamie. She was on The Stepfather.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, and I think she was on Time After Time as well, actually, now that I think about it. And she's quite good, too, because she's sort of a counterpoint to Masha, where she's supposed to be kind of like the sort of working professional, and she's very, kind of kind to him and actually does give him real pointers and, does kind of take him seriously. And you can tell that, he just has so little thought for her. And her ability in the workplace to actually judge him or to know what the show is looking for or anything.
Like she's right.
At one point,
should play it like in front of people. Like he's never like bothered to like run this past anybody.
There's nothing that she says that's not like absolutely true, which is like regardless of the quality of his material, like no one just gets the late night TV show. It's like no, get a stand up gig, workshop some of your stuff with a live audience, see what people respond to and what they don't, and come back. Like it's like she gives him like the kindest note anyone could give in the entire world, and he reads it the same way that he has conversations with Masha, pretty much, who he just has, he thinks of her as like a dog. Like that conversation they have out front the building, when, you know, he's the one who's getting into the building, and he's got the suit on, he's got this surface professionalism. He has so much in common with Masha's behavior, but because he performs differently and he looks differently, you know, he's like, you're a fucking wacko.
Yeah, Masha's just being it through and through, where Rupert's putting it on.
Yeah, like they're both pursuing the same thing, but like, you know, Rupert is just doing it in a way that has this more sort of surface societal acceptance to it, kind of, in a way where she's just like, no, we should just kidnap him and rape him.
Yeah. And they have like
interesting, like,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, what's interesting, like, he wants to be Jerry while she like just wants to be with him. And I feel like that's like the counter.
Yeah.
Between the two of them.
That's true.
Fuck. I mean, like, I love the sequences when Masha does act, when they do end up trying to kidnap Jerry and she literally gets Jerry alone. That shot of with the romantic candlelight, but Jerry just with like 600 pounds of tape on it.
Yeah, I think like Scorsese called her like a sexual terrorist, which is like such a fun
term.
That's a great term.
This is what Marty's afraid of. We now know. Yeah, so like that stuff's really fantastic, and she gives a really great performance too.
Oh, she's great,
Sandra Bernhard.
She's putting it all out on the line too. Like, she really has to be a very vulnerable and out there character. Like at one point where she's, you know, kind of like sitting on Jerry's lap, and she's just expressing how she's going to have a really fun time, and it kind of just gets like almost angrier and a little bit more aggressive as she explains what they're going to do and how much fun they're going to have that night.
And she slowly lets in some detail about like her family life too. That's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's
and
like
stuff
my parents never
and
told me they loved me, but she's kind of trying to brush it off as if it's fine because I didn't love them either. But you can tell that this has been a very deep rooted pain that has created,
resulted in her having unhealthy relationships with what expressing love is.
Exactly,
you know?
Exactly. So yeah, Sandra Bernhard's amazing in this. I can't express that enough. She's just as good as Robert De Niro in this, 100%.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing too, and I think it's something Scorsese's mentioned a couple times. He's like De Niro, you know, I've worked with him a lot. He's amazing. The performance is incredible. Oh, yeah. But he also thought that a lot of the supporting actors went sort of like undercredited.
Yeah, because Jerry, like you were saying, Jerry himself is playing like that straight man, so it's hard for people to you know, really realize what he's doing in the movie. But I think he is fantastic at you know, like the beginnings when we were talking about how he's kind of brushing him off, but doing it in a polite way. I even like when he turns around, when he keeps saying like, you're a king, Jerry, you're a king. And he like does finger guns at him or whatever, but very kind of sarcastically. And then there's that great scene, which we should maybe talk about with when he brings Rita to his house unannounced.
Oh my god!
Like
Jerry's that is honestly one of the most hard to watch scenes in terms of the.
Oh yeah, you feel so bad
in terms
Rita.
of the performance. Yeah, because he literally brings Rita to Jerry's like country home for the weekend, saying that, you know, convincing her that he's like best friends with Jerry, he's going to dinner, he's doing work with Jerry, he's even brought over some work from the office to give to Jerry. And watching him cynically weaponize Rita when Jerry, because Jerry, you know, immediately as soon as the employees who work at the house like contact him to be like, there's a guy here with a girl, he says he knows you, like we don't know what's going on, and he's like, oh my fucking god. He comes home, he finds this dude who, you know, won't stop like terrorizing his office and won't leave him alone, and the dude has broken into his house with this woman. And there's something so freaky to me about the way that
he actually gets in.
Well, and the way the Pupkin uses Rita in that moment to be like, you know, Rita's just here for a good time, Jerry. You wouldn't want to ruin her good time. Like, he's using her as a tool.
Yeah, it's like, don't make her feel bad, Jerry. Even though it's like, you put her in this situation, dude.
Exactly. Like, he knows how to weaponize social situations like that. And Jerry is just so fed up at that point. And, you know, he's very stern. He's very unamused and angry. And yeah, you can even watch him that, you know, immediately he at first goes, okay, I don't want to blow up at this girl because I don't know, you know, like really what she's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But then he immediately starts being like, okay, I'm not going to play along with this. Like De Niro thinks, and Pupkin, the way that he kind of plays it, he's like, Jerry, that's fine. How's your golf game? Oh, are we gonna have some like lunch later and shit? Like like the situation is he's broken into this guy's home, and he's immediately trying to get him to agree to like get him some food.
Yeah, and it just keeps the delusion. Like Jerry's outright saying, "What's wrong with you? You're crazy. Get out of my house." And he's still acting as if Jerry's just like playing around, just joking.
Jerry's like a brick wall. It's like very funny to watch De Niro go up against it.
Just got his arms crossed the entire time, stern faced, like, and Rupert just basically wants to keep reenacting what he's had in his head this entire time, and he can't let that go. And I gotta give it up for Jerry of these couple lines here. I love when he's like, "I told you to call to get rid of you." And then Rupert responds with, "Is that what you're like when you're on the top?" And then he goes, "No, that's what I was like before." Like, I've always been an asshole. I thought that was hilarious. And I also really like the line where he's just like, "Well, I have a life too, Jerry." And he's like, "That's not my responsibility." Like, what's wrong with you? Like, and so, yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Jerry on this scene in particular, because I just think I love when like Rupert's like, great.
"I made some mistakes," and then like Jerry's like, who else made mistakes? Hitler made mistakes.
Yeah,
that's a good one too. Yeah,
which is funny because I'm not sure if that was scripted or if it was an improvised line, because I did read that supposedly De Niro was like hitting Jerry before, off camera with anti-Semitic remarks to like get him riled up.
That's wild. I heard that too. I did hear that Jerry was okay with it, so I guess we should maybe say that. But it is pretty wild that he did that shit.
Yeah, don't do that on set to people without talking to them about doing it to them on set.
Expressive permission.
Yes, but Jerry did apparently have like a really great time filming the movie.
Hopefully and said that, he means it.
Yeah, I mean his only note about the movie was the same as basically all the critics, which is he thought that Pupkin should have killed him. That was his only note. He was like, if I was making the movie, I would have had Pupkin kill me.
Yeah, I heard he thought.
But he's like, otherwise, it's a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was. It might have been Jerry or someone else that I read, but I thought it was Jerry that said, like, even apart from the killing, he did think that him and Rupert not having some kind of wrap up seemed strange to him. I can't remember if that was Jerry, but I did read that somewhere.
It might have been, yeah. There's something sort of similar to that. I mean, a lot of people felt the same way. Again, a lot of people were saying that it was sort of like frustrating and irritatingly sort of anticlimactic, that it's a movie that threatens to explode like Taxi Driver does, and it
right.
builds with that tension, but then doesn't actually end up exploding. But I think there's something interestingly said about like what it's actually getting at by doing that.
Yeah, and for me, that exciting moment is kind of the lead up to whether or not this guy has any skill. And as far as the film presents it, I think it seems as if he actually did and kind of did have a decent skill. He had good timing. He was getting response from his jokes. So
he's like not a bad comedian.
And so for me, that is kind of the explosive scene. It's kind of like whether or not he did all this for even less than it's like whether or not he did all this for nothing. Like, did he actually have talent this entire time? And it is kind of relieving to know that he did have a little bit. When it
makes it like a lot
revealed.
more interesting too, because like it could have just been like, oh, he's like terrible at it and he's got
he just bombs. Yeah, that would just be mean. I feel like
that'd be really, really heartbreaking.
But it's like interesting though. Like the worst of it is like, oh, he's rehearsed it too much. He's like never played it in front of like a performance, in front of like an audience. But like he's not bad at writing jokes.
No, and I do think that he's got good timing, and I think that he does it on purpose too, where De Niro has this very like choreographed timing. It doesn't feel very natural or improvised. It feels like everything else we've seen from him. Like it's been focused onto a T. It's been written like all the timing is perfect and all of that. So I did like that aspect of it too, that it doesn't come off. It comes off as exactly as it should from Rupert.
I do like that half his set was just about his mom being an alcoholic, which I think is meant to be another sort of sad detail
and
that you're supposed to kind of pick up. Yeah.
Which again, you're honestly,
yeah,
it's a scary moment.
Which is one of those things where you're kind of like, okay, so was this part of the fantasy, or was this just him exaggerating for the bit?
But hoping his mom, wishing his mom was dead, really.
Yeah, but he did say earlier in the film that his style, before we actually seen what his material is, and he's kind of pitching his style, is that he, I take all the bad things that have happened to me and try to like spin them into something funny. When you kind of hear that's his idea of what his material actually is, then you actually see his material in that way, and how he didn't have a great sort of home life, and that stuff's definitely it's just ambiguous enough, and that there's a little bit of complication there, and things that are at once kind of intriguing and upsetting at the same time.
I think it's really cool that the jokes are very self-deprecating, and for us who has been with this character for so long and have kind of now understood him at a certain point, the jokes come off much more sad, whereas I could see someone like the audience, for instance, and not knowing who this guy is, just a comedian that's kind of being self-deprecative and whatever, would not see the sadness as much in those jokes. Like for me, when I watch that scene, I am very sad because it's him kind of expressing and honestly being truthful for the first time in a way. And so I just kind of like that contrast between like us as an audience and the audience that's actually watching him on the talk show. I think that's kind of cool too.
Well, and I love that, again, the kind of buildup that gets there, because again, it's so much of, him just insisting upon this one conversation he had with Jerry, meaning that he's taking over the show now, which is obviously ridiculous. And, all the kind of different conversations that, he ends up pushing the explosion at the country home, where he's like, I'm going to work 50 times harder than you did even, I'm going to achieve it. Cause he's getting, and he goes, then you're going to have 50 idiots like you to deal with or whatever.
I love all the industry shit that they cut to, where it's like all the execs wondering if they should put him on or not. And then the lawyer who's just like, I'm suing
all
everybody.
That stuff is so great.
I'm suing you. I'm suing the FBI. So it's very funny. Yeah.
Well, and one of my favorite ones is because, like, obviously immediately he goes from that to being like, okay, well, this isn't working anymore, so now we need to go to the next level. So he recruits Masha to do a straight up kidnapping of Jerry, which gets into, like the POV shots of them in the car with the sunglasses and the hats and the fake guns. Like, it's really funny. But then you also go, okay, but they are really kidnapping like Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, that's the thing. And he adds like a physical gag to the actual kidnapping too, because the shot when Robert De Niro gets out, he has a gun which turns out to be fake, but right now you think it's real, and he drops it as he's getting out of the car to get Jerry in, and he runs over, picks it back up, gets over to Jerry, he's like, get in, and it's just so comical and pathetic and hilarious.
Yeah, I love those little details like that, because they're small details. You don't know if they were actually scripted or if they just ended up working out that way. But it's amazing watching him drop that gun. Or in the first conversation with Jerry, there's a part where De Niro appears to like forget a line and does this like windmilling motion with his hands for like 5 seconds.
Right.
And I kept wondering, is that Pupkip like having a glitch in his like rehearsed thing? Like you're never really exactly sure. It's really, really great. And Scorsese obviously kind of shot it on the fly in New York to kind of capture that spontaneity a little bit as well, despite the fact that his style is very locked down. And man, that just really amplifies the tension and the unpredictability, especially when you get to like the moments where like, he's got Jerry calling up the studio being like, I've been taken hostage. They're going to fucking kill me. He's going to get tonight's monologue or they're going to kill me. But I love the way that he's, De Niro is showing him these little like reading cue cards. And he's like, I have a gun at my head. Well, yeah. Then there's a part where like he flips one card and Jerry has to like roll his eyes. He's like, the card's upside down. And so then he has to like flip it. There's another part where there's like a completely blank card, and he's like, oh my God, this guy, he's so incompetent.
And you're not, honestly, in that scene too, I don't know if he's doing like that. I think it was Andy Kaufman, where he would like on purposely fuck shit up to kind of troll people. And so I like that in that scene too. At this point, I don't trust his character enough to not be performing or not. So it's just kind of like, did he on purposely do that to maybe get a laugh out of Jerry, but he just pissed him off or something like that? I kind of have that thought when I'm watching it, and I love it.
Well, and it has one of my favorite Jerry lines in that moment too, where he finally gets to the end, where it's just like, or it's like he's gonna get the monologue, or like he won't be alive, and he just goes, well, it's not grammatically correct, but I think you get the idea. He's gonna kill me if you don't give him the monologue tonight. And meanwhile he's monologuing all about how friendship is a two-way street, Jerry.
Yeah.
Oh man. That stuff's all, fantastic. And yeah, he literally, all the conversations of all the industry people being like, is this a hoax? I love how it takes Jerry calling like 3 times before they actually pick up, because they just like, yeah, there's this guy who's an impressionist of Jerry and always calls this as a gag.
Yeah, and they have to, I like it's probably a real industry thing where they have this, this kind of like code. Yeah, they have a code so that they can be like, is this the real person or not? So that was just kind of an interesting little thing they threw in there. I like that.
And I like Jerry too, like, getting real with him in that moment where he's tied up at one point too, and saying, there are very real pressures, like every day. And if I have, if I have done something wrong in our interactions together, like I am really sorry. And you can kind of feel that, he's like, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. And, he kind of believes it. But he's like, at this point, Rupert needs to, he's kind of got the advantage in this moment, and he's going to pressure, and he's going to do the thing that he is there to do, which is get, 10 minutes of talk show in exchange for, a famous man's life.
Yeah.
And I love all the lawyers freaking out about it and being like, what are we going to do? And what is he going to say? Can we read your monologue? We don't want you like activating terrorists around the globe. And all the conversations they have are so funny.
And I love his total lack of care for any like consequences afterwards. It's just such a tunnel vision of getting on that stage and doing his 10 minutes and showing the world all of the skills that he has. Like even the scene before it where he's with the cops and they're basically like, you're under arrest. You understand that? He's like, oh yeah, I totally get it. And he's got like a smile on his face and he's just ready to go, ready to perform. It's fantastic.
Yeah. That stuff's all really, really strong, and obviously builds up to De Niro finally getting on the show, doing the thing. My favorite aspect of this is that because they've so formally had us understand what is, like the fact that this guy has such an unhinged relationship with reality that you honestly don't know what in this last like 15 minutes happens.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I do think like just the way that it shows it in the bar and all of that, it seems as if he did perform and perform well. But the thing that
I like that sequence in the bar when he goes to Rita's bar and turns the TV and stands up there and he's like, Rita, take a look at this.
Yeah, I like that. It's like the first time we see the set too. It's like we wait until he like brings it out to her at the bar.
Oh yeah, that's true. They kind of cut away from the actual like live performance and then just go right back to the cops again.
It's her that he like needs to prove it to.
Yeah,
where they were like, is this guy the dumbest guy ever? Like, what's your deal? They're like, do you understand what's happening right now? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I think I should get made up. I think I should get my makeup on. I want someone from the TV show in here right now. And they were like, dude, you're being interrogated for kidnapping.
I also love that after he performs and he's got his like confidence and all of that from doing it and showing it to Rita, the cops are still hounding him and saying like, oh, that wasn't very funny, that wasn't good, and he's just like, no, I disagree. He basically hounds him from Uncut Gems. It's fantastic.
I disagree.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I also think it's kind of this is a smaller thought, but I think it's kind of creepy just to look at the first talk show host that comes out to replace Jerry And I understand that it's his job, and he'd have to put it on and all of that. But it's just like how good they are at putting it on is kind of creepy when they think at least that Jerry is being held at gunpoint and could be shot in the head at any moment in time. I don't know. There's something,
like the show just like has to go on.
Yeah, exactly. There's something kind of eerie about that I like too.
Yeah, when they're introducing him for his performance.
Yeah, and when it's kind of funny too, though, in this like ironic way, where he just outright tells the audience that the only way he can get this gig. Yeah,
they were like, "What a great bit! Oh, you've kidnapped Jerry."
Yeah, exactly.
You strapped him to a chair.
And I think my favorite part of that is when he says, "It was the only way for me to get on this stage," because it's 100% true. And there's just a lot of humor involved in him actually just.
It's the only way I could break into show business, baby.
It's so good. He's like, and you'll see tomorrow. I'm not actually lying.
I wasn't kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, and you'll think I was crazy, but look, I figure it this way. Better to be a king for a night than a schmuck for a lifetime. Oh. He gets to leave out with his one-liner.
I want to clap.
He gets to show Rita. And he's like, I won't forget about you, Rita. And I love the guy in the bar pointing at. He's like, hey, that's the guy that was on the TV.
He's getting his recognition. And the nation is recognizing him.
And then we get this sort of final montage of where the news is talking about the bizarre debut of this brand new comedian. He's getting news coverage, and he's got 6 years in prison, but he's writing his memoirs while he's in there, king for a night, and he's on the cover of every magazine, and he eventually gets out. He gets a television special, and they're like, ladies and gentlemen, Rupert Pupkin.
Yeah, and
there's wonderful Rupert Pupkin, ladies and gentlemen. I love how many it repeats like a variation on that, like 7 or 8 times. It gets very eerie at a certain point, and definitely I think that's meant to clue you in on whether any of that stuff actually took place or not, or whether that is like his vision of how that goes after the fact.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I think it's a vision of what he sees to come after his prison sentence. Because I would believe, if he did successfully get up there and have a good set, and people found out that this is what he did to do it, there would be like a niche audience for that would absolutely eat it up and be like, this guy's a legend. So I could believe a successful Rupert Pumpkin after his prison sentence. But it's definitely
I actually buy into that reality.
Yeah, but it's definitely in that moment, like it's like the way that the announcer says it over and over again, and he's just kind of got this smile on his face, and it does feel like a somewhat empty studio. It doesn't quite seem as lively as a reality would be. So I don't know, but I do really like that ending.
Well, that's what I would say. I would say like literally the final last few seconds take on a stranger quality than just like, even though like this is similar obviously to the ending of Taxi Driver, where like the newspapers all say this guy is like a hero, even though we've spent a while enough time with him to know that he's really not. But I do think. And I think there was something cynical in there about the idea of, how then people sort of ingest this story that they've heard and everything. And I think that's something similar that's happening here. But I do think that this makes the deliberate choice to have this very eerie, strange hold on the actual talk show that he gets. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that ending is perfect. And I think it very specifically gets into the overall idea that's been layered throughout the film, starting with the first sort of fantasy sequence that he has with Jerry's conversation about this, this idea of his sort of obsessive consumption of media, like completely detaching him from reality to the point where the fantasy is now dictating and imposing itself onto reality. And where obviously the end the end goal of this is a vicious cycle of like, America being taken hostage by a charismatic psychopath of a character. and the journey is very intentionally kind of infuriating and skin crawling and really bleakly, funny. Like I think some people, I think the first time I watched this, I definitely felt more discomfort than I did sort of humor. But on rewatches, I get a lot more out of the sort of like anti-comedy qualities that it has.
Yeah.
Like there's so much, you got to respect the hustle, the diabolical hustle Yeah. And despite the fact that everything Marty is doing is, an attempt to kind of rub our face in kind of like the sort of like more mundane, depressing reality of what this character is doing to the people around him. And also showing a little bit of sympathy both to, the character of Jerry, who is kind of now sort of like this, this slave to this industry and this sort of image that he's created of himself, even if it's not who he is when he, goes home and wants to watch a movie. And also, sympathetic to the conditions that drive someone, to the struggling conditions of, an artist who just wants to make it, man. I mean, everyone's been there on some level. I don't know if everyone's gone this route with it, but I think, yeah, we'll find out if Jamie, I'll announce on this show the day that Jamie goes Rupert Pupkin mode and I have to go solo for an episode. And he's like, yeah, he's locked up.
Gosh, I got a huge
We don't know.
gig.
I don't know what band you would take hostage, but you took a band hostage.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about it, narrowing it down.
Yeah, but yeah, so I find the movie very funny and pivoting, I think, towards reductive rating around, which for you, Michael, is where we remove all the words, all the nuance, and reduce the movie to a number between 1 and 5. But it's also kind of become final statements, or if there was any lines or any scenes that we maybe miss, we like to bring them up and kind of catch them here at the end. But yeah, I think that for me, this is honestly a pretty easy 5. I mean, it's. Not to say, this is Scorsese. The dude has a lot of 5s for me, but and this has since been, I think, really reclaimed by people. So, I think this kind of is for a lot of people kind of considered like a kind of like top, I hope top 5. I don't know. Maybe not. If it's not, it probably should be.
Yeah, I think it's definitely top tier Scorsese.
Yeah, like it really is top tier, and it deserved more than the tepid reaction that it got, especially when it came out, and being a bomb and everything like that, and kind of being made fun of a little bit, despite even if you thought it failed, it was an ambitious failure, if nothing else, for for people, and I think just everything that failed about it has been sort of righteously clarified as, sort of like the intent of the movie, like right. I don't see how an explosion of violence at the end of this film makes it a better film.
I think it would make it worse and kind of just sad in a way I don't think would ring true to the rest of the movie. Yeah,
I agree. I think there's something so interesting and kind of almost scarier about it that it is kind of like slightly lower stakes, but like still that sort of pathological obsession with the and the absurdity of his relationship with celebrity and with the industry is all there. And I think that Scorsese expertly, people a lot of the time like to talk about him as someone who only has like one kind of style, which is obviously not true in any case, because the man has made all kinds of different films. But this in particular is a really interesting note if you compare it to his 70s and his 80s run, because I think he really does adjust his style to not get swept up in the hysteria of the character, which is what I think people wanted, which is what people were like, that's what we kind of expected. We wanted more subjectivity, done in a more heightened style. And instead he, toned down that so that the blurring of reality and fantasy was just more mundane. And the way that, the way that we just instead sit with him, this walking fantasy, interacting with real surroundings and real people. And I find that a lot more troubling, honestly. I find that a lot more ambiguous and a lot more disturbing, because, it depicts show business as this thing that obviously very clearly connects people, but it's also kind of like this, in some ways it's kind of something that you interact with that's kind of monstrous and kind of isolating at the same time. And I think both Rupert and Jerry as characters experience it in different ways. And I think De Niro and Scorsese both really got into the milieu of sort of like late night TV and stand-up comedy. I like how even some of the simple shot, reverse shot he picked was like, clearly he was just pulling from like the way that TV was shot and the way that comedy was shot. And I think it made it, successfully feel, the movie feel kind of cynical and kind of pathetic in some ways without having to resort to any very simple moralizing, I think is really the key.
Yeah.
You know, again, he doesn't get up there and bomb. He doesn't, you know, there's nothing, I think, you know, super, simple about the film. And I think that is what kind of makes it sit in your mind a little bit longer. And again, the casting of Jerry Lewis as the sad, unamused straight man to De Niro just going off like crazy, I think is a real stroke of genius and an understated quality to what makes the film work. Again, his anguish and anger at this beast that he's just destined to reckon with forever because he's achieved his own dream is really effective. And I think creates a really dark undercurrent to the fact that, you know, we're watching a character trying to achieve his dream. So yeah, anyway, this movie I think is genius. And it has many, many artists involved in this at the top of their game, making you trying to make you feel as uncomfortable and kind of irritated and sad. And I think it was, you know, probably destined to bomb and be misunderstood. But I'm glad to see that it is revered many years later. And one line I wanted to point out that we somehow didn't get to that I wanted to bring out because it's a line that will sit with me forever. I think about this line all the time, is De Niro in that recording room, recording the tape for Jerry, thinking that Jerry's going to listen to it, and being like, you know, all these big shots, you know, they ignore the struggling artists, and, you know, they're all, you know, I think they're all just cynics, embittered by their own failure, the fact that people don't, you know, think that big shots will talk to us. And then he goes, I know, Jerry, that you are as human as the rest of us, if not more so.
Which must be like especially shattering, I guess, for him in particular, when he has that moment in Jerry's house and he says like, oh, you're just like the rest on top and all of that. So anyway.
Yeah, well, and also the idea that like the walking performance that is like the most inhuman performance in the movie, saying that, you know, being the dictator of what is and isn't human is also just very funny to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think this is a 5, absolute masterpiece. I was surprised to see that it wasn't at least a box office success when it came out, because, you know, you got Scorsese right after Raging Bull, you got De Niro, Jerry Lewis. I know had a huge following, and so man, in the 60s and 70s especially, Nutty Professor, Ladies Man, those movies went off for people. Absolutely. So
like, what era is this for Jerry Lewis? In the 80s?
Jerry was primarily the 60s, but is still into the 70s and into the 80s, honestly. But I do think that his peak of him as a director making really big films, a lot of his biggest films are from the 60s.
Gotcha, yeah. Yeah, but so, I mean, all 3, I think, of the leads here have powerhouse performances, including Jerry, who has to kind of play that straight man. But I think he does it really, really well. I think he has a great understanding of this kind of attitude you have to give within show business, and an unfortunate attitude you have to give within show business. And kind of like, I love the way that he politely brushes him off, but only to reveal later on that it was exactly that, a brush off. He wasn't really sincerely trying to hear Rupert, but you also understand there is a sympathy for Jerry that I think is really good, because even though he has some moments where you think like he might be short with people, has a temper, angry, whatever, this guy is being stalked and eventually almost raped by fanatics. So, you know, you got to have some sympathy there. But regardless, I think Sandra Bernhard, too, is incredible. She's really just giving it her all. And where Robert De Niro has some more safety with kind of his like silliness and his fake demeanor with the suit and all of that, and his fake image, Sandra just has to put it all out on the line the entire time. She's, you know, she's unhinged at certain points. She's, you know, very sympathetic at certain points, especially when they start to kind of slowly reveal her past, but very subtly. I like the way they do that too. The way that they reveal their pasts through themselves saying it, but in this way that they're kind of trying to lie about it and trying to kind of be still distanced from it. With Rupert, it's like his jokes, and with Sandra, I guess it's the way that she views Jerry. So
I love that she like dresses him in like a nice sweater and is like, I feel so impulsive tonight. Anything can happen.
Yeah, and I like that she puts on this kind. We forgot to talk about this, where she puts on this kind of like the I guess it's like not a makeup artist, but whatever you would call someone that would dress her, a dresser maybe or something, where she's kind of like, oh, that color is fabulous. It's just absolutely great. And I like that she's trying to like play a little bit in show business. Like she has a position in show business or something like that. That was cool too. I like that. But yeah.
Oh, well, and we forgot to mention she sings the Ray Charles song back to him at one point.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that, because I almost forgot. She actually has a decent voice, like at certain parts.
Yeah.
Like and so that was something I found kind of
she's talented
sad too. Is that they both have talent, but they're just too diluted and kind of unstable for them to really focus and hone in on it. Rupert eventually does, but I found it sad that Masha didn't get
I almost forgot the part where she's like running in her underwear like through the streets like screaming for Jerry. I think that's like the last time that we see her.
And he's got tape all around
she's not
him.
a part of like, it is like interesting that she's not a part of all of like his fantasy at the end. Like we don't know what happens to Masha at the end.
Yeah, and that's kind of sad too. It's like Rupert. Well, it's like he was using.
Oh, she was totally a tool.
It's a tool.
Totally
it's
a tool.
Like
everyone around him is a tool.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, 5 absolute masterpiece. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. For you, Michael.
I agree with both of you. It's I think it's a solid 5. Like I think it's Scorsese, like as a creative, I think he understands that like how like uncomfortable it is to like have like any ambition in like the field you want to be in, and like also like how deluded you have to be to like want to be famous. I think he also like, it's like interesting that like understands like, oh, like everybody wants this, like everybody wants a piece of that fame. Like I always think about like the one like interesting detail about when they're at like Jerry's place is that like when they're leaving, Rita like I think is like one of the more sympathetic characters, but like even she like tries to steal something from Jerry's house, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think she tries to get something out of the fact that they were there, and also tries to make herself look very good and being like, I knew nothing about this, Jerry. If there's anything that I could possibly do to make this up to you, like, you know, this guy is crazy. He just came into my life like yesterday, you know, like yeah.
Like it's very interesting. Like everybody like wants a piece of this, and I think that it's something that people like maybe weren't ready to deal with back in the 80s, but like now is like pretty prevalent, and that's like just how we deal with like celebrity culture now.
Well, that's the thing. It's like a lot of the time now, a lot of people are encouraged marketing wise to do really extreme things because, you know, there will be consequences, but 9 times out of 10, a month later, when everyone forgets about what you did, now you have a fan base, and it's ridiculous. And I don't like that part of it, but it is unfortunately a reality of just show business in general, you know?
Yeah, like stans like used to be like a scary term, but like now that's just like something that people like affectionately call themselves for like different celebrities.
Exactly. It's like,
it's
I
really
don't think Eminem's stan was getting at that point. Yeah, 100%.
I think it's a great movie.
Yeah, me too. All right, well, I think that will wrap it up for the King of Comedy. We're going to be right back, and we are going to be talking about Perfect Blue.
信じているわミーマニアさん私は何一つ変わらない
All right, we are back, and we are talking Perfect Blue, the 1997 Japanese animated psychological thriller film directed by one Satoshi Kon. It's our first time talking about him.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into this because this obviously, you know, we'll get into sort of like how the basic premise, which, you know, involves kind of like a sort of pop singer turned actress who is getting involved with, you know, having sort of an obsessed stalker fan that is, you know, sort of, you know, trying to possibly reach them violently. So there's some connections to in the basic plotting to King of Comedy. But what was so interesting is we were just talking about with King of Comedy that, you know, there's something there about this sort of tonal, you know, sort of walk that it does between genuinely funny sequences of like miscommunication, then combined with the sort of like agonizing undercurrent running through them of like not really knowing the limits of the, you know, disturbing psychology kind of on display. And the end results are, you know, kind of challenging in an understated way, you know, in the sense that they are never really explicitly spelling out how you should feel about it. They're just kind of showing you a thing that is taking place in front of you. It's like if Scorsese took like one, you know, like you could say Travis Bickle, but I also thought a lot I his Hi Mom character. You remember that one, Jamie, with Brian De Palma that he did?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's the performance I think about the most when I think about King of Comedy a little bit.
Definitely.
Just because it has him kind of like cynically invading and destroying the various movements he's getting into, whether it's like filmmaking or political or social relationships, etc.
With a smile on his face.
Exactly. So it's like if you dropped like that character into like an Albert Brooks movie, it's disorienting. Your wires get crossed in, I think, really rewarding ways. But there's something very interesting about the choice that was made here, which is that Satoshi Kon is, you know, also apparently, reading up on him, he's someone who really loved disorienting audiences and frequently returned to a very similar idea of a realistic sort of character and settings, giving way to kind of a more dreamier pictorial expression of their worlds, and, you know, sharing with King of Comedy a literal sort of depiction of deranged blurring of fiction and reality, but where King of Comedy kind of had a little bit of ambiguity to it, this has a much more directly confrontational and kind of like assaultive quality to it. It's very disturbing and traumatic and really cranked up for, I think, maximum psychological subjectivity and impact, whether it's like, you know, some of the gruesomeness of it, or whether it's just like the literal function of like time and space just completely collapsing in this woman's mind for long stretches of the film. Yeah, but Satoshi Kon, he was a Japanese manga artist turned animator and filmmaker. He sadly passed away of pancreatic cancer in 2010 at the age of 46.
Oh, damn.
So he only left behind, I think, 4 films, but he has a lot of art and he worked on a couple shows and stuff like that. He started out in graphic design school doing sort of like short manga stories, and eventually this will really interest you, Jamie. It got him a job as an assistant to Katsuhiro Otomo, which many of you will recognize as the man behind Akira.
Yeah, that movie's amazing.
So obviously we have already covered that on the show a couple of years back. We had a really great time talking about it with Perry Rulland, and we loved a lot of the art and, you know, some of the sort of textured quality of some of the design work. You can tell that, you know, this guy definitely worked with Otomo for a while. And also, as a result, this is an even funnier coincidence, Jamie, he actually ended up writing the screenplay for Otomo's live action film, which we covered on this show, World Apartment Horror.
Oh.
Which is an insane movie if no one's seen it. It's like this Yakuza/supernatural horror film that takes place in like an apartment, and it's also like a quasi exorcism of like Japanese racist imperialist past. Like, it's kind of nuts.
Yeah,
that sounds cool.
It's very good.
Yeah, we talked about it, I think, in like the first or second year of the show, and we probably mentioned on that show when we looked at this guy's credits, but I just thought it was so funny that so this guy, you can kind of see a little bit of Akira, you can kind of see a little bit of World Apartment Horror, but he, at least in just terms of some of the design that he was choosing, and obviously some of the insane intensity of the psychological intensity of World Apartment Horror, you can tell that he wrote that film. All eventually led to his first directing gig, which is this film here, Perfect Blue, and is an adaptation of a novel that he was actually given full creative freedom on, because apparently... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I heard that the original story was actually more of a very straightforward stalker, I guess, slasher kind of horror thing, and then he wanted to mold it into more surreal and not quite sure whether we're in reality or a dream or something like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. He thought the original material was kind of like just a cheap splatter horror story. It had a pretty standard plot trajectory of like a crazy, like literally it was just a crazy fan who we see in the beginning of the film stalks this girl and tries to rape and kill her. And like that was like that was the story.
And the stalker that they still went with like design wise does have this just very outright ugly and
always terrifying.
Yeah. And so it feels as if they still got the physicality of that character, like but then they started diving into, like I said, the kind of like dreamscapes and whether or not we're in reality or not.
So it's like the identity angle, like all what Cohen brought to it.
Mm-hmm. A lot of that, yeah. So
okay.
he introduced the sort of especially the film within a film quality, like the idea of the TV show that they were making had nothing to do with the original thing, the double bind show that they're shooting, which is practically like a parody of like an extreme American like murder procedural. Right. So the whole film within a film and the blurring, the sort of formal blurring of, reality and dream, where like half the time you don't know, if you're watching a scene from the show that they're shooting, or if you're watching something that's happening to her, or if you're watching her have a nightmare, like half the time you don't know what you're watching. And he was really intrigued by that because he was like, look, there's a lot of stories out there that are focused on pervert killers. And he's like, and a lot of them have been done well. I think he even cited like, Seven exists, Silence of the Lambs exists. By the time I got around to making this film, he was like, I want to do something else. So instead of making it about the killer, he chose to make the killings more mysterious and kind of make it a little bit of, sort of like who is actually doing all of this to her, and focus on fully fleshing out this broken psyche of this victim who's actually being, experiencing this and actually just getting fully subjectively involved in her head, to the point that we don't know which way is up.
Is there like early internet stuff, like all stuff, something that he introduced also?
That I don't know. I'd have to go back and actually read it.
Sure.
But I was kind of going off basic, sort of summaries that I could find. Most people seem to suggest that the material was completely overhauled structurally. And a lot of the basically the final third of it is entirely him, because the way that it would have just been a pop girl gets stalked by a fan and the fan attacks her. So the climax of the film would have happened at like the hour point, but there's an additional 20 minutes of the film where, he tries to kind of subvert that
almost
a
goes
little
Giallo
bit.
mode.
Yeah,
he does go Giallo mode. It's the twist is ridiculous. It reminded me of what was that one we covered last Spooktober? What was the one where
crystal plumage?
A bird with the crystal plumage? I think. Yeah. I was straight up thinking of like an Argento plot twist. But yeah, no, I think that the thing about this is, if anyone had troubles with King of Comedy because they felt that it wasn't getting swept up enough in the hysterical psychology of the protagonist, this is the movie for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because this is 80 straight minutes of that, like front to back. You know it immediately, and I think it's very expertly sort of like deployed, but like right from the opening, where you get sort of like, again, this film within a film quality, where we're at first like watching like what looks like a knockoff Power Rangers. They're like, curse you, I'll get you knocked next time, Powertron.
And you think you're watching the show, which is cool.
Yeah, you think you're watching the show. And then you get a bunch of kids running away from the stage being like, wow, that's nothing like what it was like on TV. It looks so cheap. Right away, bringing up like this difference between, like sort of like the actual media production and, reality.
Right.
And then you also get that through a lot of the cutting, because the opening sequence entirely is like, like all of these, sort of fans waiting around for this pop girl group, selling pamphlets, a little bit of backstage tension. And I love that it's cutting between the, sort of pop idol performance that they are putting on. And then also this very sort of like mundane after the show thing that she's doing. It's like her riding the subway and her reflection on the train, her doing some grocery shopping.
Yeah. And it's cool just because it's like the beginning of that established strange timeline that we're going to go on where we're never quite sure if we're in the present or the past. Or in a piece of media that's just representing her life, like the show that she eventually gets on. So that I found very cool. I found myself already thinking, like, are we looking at her in the past right now before she broke out into the pop, the pop world, or are we looking at her in the future where it's afterwards and she's reflecting on it? And so I think it's a great way of establishing that right away, kind of getting you just in the mindset, thinking about it while you're watching the movie.
Yeah, I think the opening cross-cutting is just really, really sharp and also sets up a little bit of a timeline of, like, we're getting a little bit of the show, we're getting a little bit of her going home after the show, we're getting a little bit of kind of like her agent and her manager arguing over her career, like she's not even there in the room with them.
Yeah, she doesn't say almost anything, and they're just making decisions and arguing about those decisions.
Yeah, they were like, does she stay in the pop group where she doesn't get that much of a percentage, or does she pursue, sort of like more adult acting where, she's actually, she has a chance of being a bigger star, but it's going to be a difficult kind of breakthrough experience. And no one asks for her insight on what she wants to do about it. It's literally, this industry has been predetermined for her, and she's being pushed to move on from one industry to another.
And it's even hard to tell if, like, she at a certain point is making those decisions. Like, there are moments where she makes choices, like she wants to be an actress and all that, but it's hard to say just because you get that image of the two managers fighting each other and arguing that it's like, was she led to think that the actress thing would be a good idea, and now she's thinking that this is her own choice? It's just always very difficult to tell once they've established that this is her relationship with the agents that she works with.
Yeah, like they're talking like she's not there, so that's her relationship with them, and then her relationship with her fans is we get this really creepy, ugly-looking motherfucker sitting in the audience.
There's that like one really great like shot where like it seems like he's like it's like a POV from like his eyes where he's like holding her.
Yeah, amazing image of he's holding her like an object that like belongs to him, which is going to be really important. This idea of like, that someone else can look at another person as like they're just an image and feel that by consuming it, like they own it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like it's theirs.
And so if she changes that image, it feels as if she's taking away something from him. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's really cool to see that established in like a single composition.
Yeah, definitely.
the relationship that, the fans are about to have with her. And yeah, in this scene, she essentially decides she's going to retire from pop singing. And she is going to pursue this future in acting, and she hopes all of her fans will kind of come with her and support her. And it's showing off obviously this culture of stans and fan letters and stalkers and anything. But I do like that there is also in the performance there's this very heightened kind of romantic quality to the girls dancing around and singing versus her going home to her apartment and like taking moldy cheese out of her fridge. Like little moments like that little details like that they include as well.
I also find sorry, I didn't mean to.
Go ahead.
I was just. No, go ahead. I find it interesting too that all those fans that we were mentioning are mostly like males in their late 20s, early 30s. It seems like.
Yeah, that's a great detail.
Because I don't think there's really one teenage girl that you see that's fanning over them. Most of them are very judgmental, adult males.
Yes. Yeah, and I just like immediately just how, at once the filmmaking is showing you that this experience is kind of predetermined, like it's on rails. She's already kind of being forced into it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it also gives you kind of like, this kind of claustrophobic quality to it a little bit as well, that, she can't, she's surrounded by all of these people all of the time. Even when she's home, she can't really ignore the world that she's, a part of. She's opening letters where they're like, sing for us forever, Mima. And, she gets a letter that says that I like looking into Mima's room, and she immediately like looks out her sliding door being like, is someone like straight up like looking at me right now? And then she gets a faxed message of like traitor for like leaving the pop girl group and everything like that and pursuing this drastic image change that she is. And like even when she's home, she can't escape it.
And I just love the design because it's anime. They can do a lot of like cool exaggerations. So they have these like, you know, zoom ins and characters gasping and all of that more so than they would. And I just love the look of that fax coming out, and it just has traitor, and all the font is very like scribbled and just aggressive and angry looking, and it's really good stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the art style is really incredible. Like all of the drawings of Tokyo are really amazing. The way that it ranges from, again, these more sort of like mundane, sort of like real location looking images and these more sort of dreamy, exaggerated ones. It's very evocative and it's very textured. There's great compositions.
A lot of the people just like normal people. Like only like the pop stars really look like anime characters. Everybody else looks like kind of mundane or even like glow. Ugly, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's great use of like perspective and color in it. Obviously, this really sharp, sort of elegantly fractured sort of cutting style we've been talking about, and it all works sort of in contrast with the really, really dark and, you know, troubling material that we eventually get to. I especially love the way that this transitions a lot through this sort of like dream that she's experiencing, and whether it is or not, or whether it's actually happening to her. Like there's one great one in particular of there's a part where they're doing sort of like a fashion show on the show that she's shooting, and there's cameras flashing everywhere, and then the camera flashing shooting the fashion show becomes the camera flashing of a crime scene photographer like shooting a corpse,
right? And at first
like,
you're not sure. It's like, did someone actually get murdered? Because you do start to see the slasher elements in the murders and stuff. So you're not quite ever sure if we're watching a murder in reality or at the television show.
Yeah. Well, and also just the sort of the visual use of cameras and screens and computers and TVs. Like it's really claustrophobic and alienating. You know, and again, sort of similar to King of Comedy, where it's scary in the sense that these devices that are being used to obviously connect people in ways that are very liberating and very interesting and cool are also, you know, starting to physically impose themselves on this like real person's life. It's not just like, you know, the paparazzi coming after her. It's something, you know, it's built into the design work. Sometimes she's just walking by an electronics store that has cameras filming her, or a giant screen billboard of herself like looming over her. Like there's really great little image stuff like that I think is really great. And at a certain point, you know, she starts to even sort of like visualize certain things, or maybe even hallucinate certain things, which definitely gets you into the questions of like identity and perception and kind of duality that are taking place. There's even a voyeuristic quality. I love all of the stuff about this, like, you know, perfect, pristine, floating image of her trying to kill her. Like that visual image is just so Hitchcock that I was blown away by it. And then obviously then developing that and not into, you know, sort of like the very nightmarish, gruesome psychodrama kind of style is doing, where she's working through this subjective experience in her head, but it's taking on a physically expressive quality.
And it adds this fantasy element to it that I like too, because her pop version of herself is often seen like floating throughout the city, almost flying like a superhero or something like that. So that's something I also really liked. Something I found interesting was the way that they used the internet as well, like with the forums or whatever. And at first I liked that she
has to ask what it is at first, which I thought was funny. What is that?
And I like it.
She was like, Mima's room is a fan made chat room diary, you know? And she's like, oh.
And she's intrigued and kind of excited about it at first, because she sees like these fans.
She's like, that's cool.
Yeah. And these kind of interactions, but then she starts to see one in particular that is way too specific and seems to know way too much about the details of her life that really freaks her out. But I like her initial like intrigue and happiness about the interaction that she could have. But then that closeness, that the way that people can interact now on a more personal level is kind of also where her fear is coming now. So that was a cool and interesting way. And it was just cool to see the internet being like, I don't know when they started to implement that into like plotting and stuff, but to see it in 97 was kind of cool. I just can't remember when that became a big thing.
Well, definitely like the idea of sort of like internet stalkers and fan chat rooms and stuff. I don't know the earliest that I've seen that. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's like it's really bizarre and like interesting, like how prescient it is about like we're all like on Twitter, and I feel like it really captures what it's like to be on like Twitter in that capacity.
That's now like I mean that's even more it's right away, right? Like you can get an instant message just from somebody, just an and there you go, they've interacted with you and you know exactly who they are. I mean, not all the time, I guess, but
sure.
There's a speediness to that is strange, and like this is just kind of it's something that hasn't really formed yet, but seeing it 20 years ago is just kind of interesting to see how people were reacting
I
to
look
it.
forward to the day that Sleazoids gets a PO box and someone sends us a bomb. That'll be a great day.
Hell yeah.
By the way, this was around the time that Bjork got mailed a bomb, right?
Oh,
was that around? That was around this time, right?
I think it definitely was like late 90s, early 2000s. I'm pretty sure because I know the guy made a bunch of videotapes and sent it to her and stuff. I've seen stuff.
Yeah, so this was stuff that was like actually happening, and like when she eventually gets on the set, and like her manager is sent like a letter that had like explodes in his hands, and they're like the next one will be real, and like that kind of stuff. And when she so it's just a. The way that people can, start imposing themselves on her, even though she has no idea who they are. And even if she's intrigued by it, like, again, you're right. When she first goes on that fan site, she's like, it's kind of cute and fun. She's like, wow, this person really, really knows me, really cares about me in kind of a way. And then she starts reading her daily routine that we saw in that opening sequence where she was like, like what foot she stepped off with and like what piece of fruit that she grabbed and like that kind of stuff. And like that starts to freak her out. Yes. Yeah, it's clearly written by someone who is stalking her. And
is it is he also acting like her as well?
And also from the perspective of her, which is something that's really, really interesting because at a certain point, obviously she's reading this from the point of view as if she is the one saying it. And there's a certain point later in the film where actually these lines, which are clearly being written by a stalker fan, she starts interpreting them as like her own thoughts, where she like reads an article about her going somewhere and she doesn't even remember going to that place. She's like, I guess I went there today, because she's starting to like lose track of reality at that point. She doesn't, her days are starting to blend together in the editing style.
And I love the way that they do some of that blending where she'll be having like a conversation, even maybe with herself, trying to reflect and maybe, keep some sanity. And then it'll jump to her being on set and saying those things out loud in front of people completely out of context. So she just looks insane. And you just feel so much sympathy for her because we've seen, it's that same thing where you just see the prior scenes so that you see the context and what she's dealing with. Whereas everyone else would just kind of look at her like, you're losing it. You're like, what are you talking about right now? You said some random sentence out of nowhere when we're trying to shoot a scene. So you really do get inside of her head and feel a lot of sympathy, a lot.
Well, and too, some of the lines that she's being asked to deliver on set are actually like
relating,
relating to her. Like when the one girl, the one older actress is kind of like being her therapist in show. And she's talking about like this continuous stream of memories, and we all create images and, illusions of ourselves and all of this. And she's like, yeah, that's about right. That's the experience that I'm having right now. And also the experience of just, being an actress, like in the industry and trying to like make my way. And some of the ways that she, this has a very cynical view also of the industry as well, and has a bit of industry critique in it, same as King of Comedy does. And the stuff that's really, really hard to watch is when they pressure her into doing that rape scene that she does on the show.
Yeah, and that's also another moment where you're not quite sure if the choice she's making is truly based on something she wants to do, or if it's like the pressure of the agent, or if it's the pressure of her just wanting to be taken seriously in this new line of work.
Yeah, she kind of accepts it. I think like in the moment she agrees to do it. Right. Like she says, oh, it's okay, I'll do it. Like they want me to do it. But after the scene takes place, she's very clearly like, I never wanted to do it. I was just being polite. And this is just the way that, like very clearly.
Like, it's not something that she actually like had to go through, but she still carries all of the trauma from it throughout the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and the way that they do that scene in general, like the stopping and starting of the rape scene itself, like you do kind of understand how someone could really take that seriously, even though they know that they're acting and on a set and it is controlled and people are, being professionals and all of that. But it's just... Well, yeah,
she even says, it's not as if I'm like really getting raped or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
Even though she sees a reflection of her past self in the reflection, refusing the role and being like, why are you doing this? And, you're going to destroy my image, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Then she goes...
I was gonna say, like, it's jumping ahead a little bit, but like it is interesting, like the final scene with like her and her stalker, like it is like framed like almost exactly the same way, like he tries to assault her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. I think it's even on the same set. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely on like the stage area where she's like, she's like in the club and, in the sort of like constructed version of it on stage, she's like a stripper in a club who just starts being sort of like assaulted by the audience. And a lot of the stuff where it just like immediately goes into it, basically as if you were watching the real thing. In the film. It's completely indistinguishable stylistically from the experience that she would be having if, this was really happening to her. But then they'll cut in the middle of the scene and they'll be like, all right, we're moving the cameras, we're moving the lights. And I do love the detail of the other performer who's attacking her being like, are you okay? Like, I'm sorry. Like, you're screaming your head off. You're like, it's great acting,
Yeah, I also.
But then they're like, no break yet, like take two, and like immediately back into the screaming, and it's a really, really disturbing sequence. Even though that it was faked and it was consensual, and it's really style. I think it's just the fact that it's stylistically indistinguishable from what the sequence would look and sound like, if it was just being done for real in the same film.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of is similar to, as Michael was pointing out, it's very similar to the actual sequence that does take place.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And this one I just wanted to bring up because it's lesser, but it's I think it's still a cool little moment where she is first getting on the set and she has to do her first line. And it's just that thought of like her anxiety and perception of people. And she just looks around and seems to think that every single person is like talking about her and laughing at her.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great because he really does emphasize like several shots of that to really get inside her head, and just this simple anxiety of starting something new and being the rookie.
Mm-hmm. No, it definitely very subjectively gets into, her feelings and her anxieties about everything. And when she eventually comes home after the rape sequence, there's that great scene where she's in the tub and she's screaming. Which was ripped off by Aronofsky and what was it, Requiem for a Dream?
I
think everyone
bought the rights for it, right?
Yeah, he bought the rights to this film so that he could basically just like point blank steal that scene frame for frame. Yeah.
But you then like later kind of use this for like Black Swan also.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Black Swan there as well.
Yeah. Well, definitely.
He very clearly wanted to remake this movie in live action, and he just never did.
Well, and he claims that it had, like, Black Swan had nothing to do with this, even though he is a fan of the movie. I can't help but see it. Like, I mean, there's too many. Crossing with the delusions and the sense of reality.
Well, it's like there was like the shots where like Natalie Portman's like looking in the mirror,
artistry and the construction of it and everything too. Yeah.
Yeah. Whether or not she's actually interacting with certain people and stuff, like it's all there. So it just feels, it feels a little ridiculous. But anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I really like this scene when she comes home and she finds that all of like her fish are just dead. And like, that's just like a really upsetting thing that just, sort of lets it all out, where she's, very upset that she didn't actually want it. Like, of course she didn't want to do it. She thought her managers would just say, you don't have to do this, and like, why is the screenwriter even, cynically like incorporating this plot line kind of in the first place for her?
Right.
That it's just kind of expected of her that to break that pop girl reputation, she needs to get, sort of like, she needs to get dirty. And then this starts obviously triggering, something psychologically within herself where she's upset with herself at kind of, as she sees it, kind of tarnishing her image and maybe making a mistake. But then also her fans are thinking the same, which is, how are you possibly doing this? You've ruined this innocent image of yourself. She literally watches the innocent angel version of herself like float away into like the Tokyo neon night, literally pop out of her own TV and like taunt her and shit like that. So it's a combination of like the fans are writing about this and saying this about her. And also, there's a couple anxieties that some of these are also her own feelings, but the issue is that she can't distinguish the two anymore. Like, what the fans are thinking, what they're writing about her, what is this image of her that they all have versus, who is the real her. And that is kind of like the struggle that she has as a character, is that loss of subjective control over her own self, identity, image, everything. And that just gets further and further enacted upon when the violence starts popping up in really great sequences. I thought, like, I love that sequence of the screenwriter who is the first to die because he wrote the rape scene and he was the one who tarnished her image. And I love that he's originally like stalked just by her music in the parking garage. And it's like this really like romantic pop song where she's like, she's here for you. She's got white wings. He's got it on like a portable CD player, like bass boosted.
Yeah. And that reveal of the kill is awesome. Just to have the opening of the elevator and then the tape player itself, the kind of the thing that's been scaring him and taunting him and kind of the hint of who's doing this. And then the elevator opening up to just his eyes completely gouged out. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Where he like doesn't deserve to like see her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very economical but like scary way of doing that death, which is then leads into kind of like the big sort of like nude photo shoot sequence where like the photographer is sort of taking photos of her, and they've said that this guy at some point he's going to ask you to like take your top off, and she ends up taking these photos and becomes this this sort of, again, not the dream girl artificial. She becomes sort of like this real girl that nobody wants. And I love the scene of the crazy stalker fan guy buying up like every copy of the magazine, the porno magazine or whatever that she's in, being like, nobody can look at her. And I love the fucking like layer that he has with all of his computer screens and all of the screens of her plastered everywhere around his room that start like talking to him and telling him what to do, and all like that stuff's all really sick.
Yeah, even the pop star, like the projected pop star image, like hugs him and is in the room with him and acts like a lover kind of thing. Like, it is wild. Yeah, it's like they do it spin around the entire room.
Also, like it's interesting. It's like he's both like repulsed by like that she's like doing like these like dirtier things, but like he's also like into it, and like he ends up like acting on it at the end.
Yeah, a little bit. True. Yeah, so that stuff's really interesting. Well, yeah, and also his whole place just looks like something I'm terrified that I know what it is because of our goddamn Discord that we have. But it looks like a fucking goon cave. If you don't know what that is, don't Google that. Don't Google that. But that's what his fucking room looks like. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And he's like, she would never do this. This is not the real her, and he's always being, and he has it in his mind that he is going to protect her, but he is again just protecting this kind of vision of her that he has.
Yeah, he's going to get rid of this specific vision of her. It's not going to be, the pop star. It's going to be, I'm just going to kill this new actress girl, this new persona.
And all the pop star pictures on his wall are like literally like thanking him for helping. Helping her maintain this image.
That's right, for bringing her back. My God. And once again, too, like the way that they portray this guy, like they do these like zoom ins on his face, and he's sweating, and he's got these like
just disgusting teeth.
Like it just they tried to make him the grossest possible person ever, and they succeed. They do a really good job.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's really interesting about this too is that, again, it's collapsing an experience that her fans are having with an experience that she is also having. And as her days start to blend together, and she doesn't know whether, at any given moment, whether she's having a conversation with her friend, or whether a conversation with her manager, or whether she's shooting a scene, or whether, she's someone's hounding her elsewhere, or like a fan, or she doesn't know any of the things that's happening, and she is getting to the point where you can even find her doubting herself, and she's like, maybe this image of me that is like following me around and taunting me, like maybe she is like more like the real me than like even I am. And
like her only, real relationships
you feel really bad for her.
Yeah, like her only like real relationship to herself is like how people see her.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is obviously very upsetting when, as people see her, it like that vision is changing. As she has that conversation, like she's having like a real conversation with her manager, which then becomes a show conversation, which then breaks into, all right, take two. She hears while she's like alone in her room, reminding us back to the filmed rape sequence that they were doing earlier. So like all of these things are blending together.
Real? She doesn't even know if an entire day that she experienced, or at least thinks she experienced, actually happened. She starts questioning her entire life, really.
Yeah, I mean, she literally like starts. She cuts her hand on a cup, and she looks at her blood, and that's like the first thing she's like, my blood is real, right?
Yeah. And that she actually breaks with her hands, because she's just like, so I don't know if she's like disassociating in the moment or whatever, but she's locked in her own head, and at that point she breaks the glass, and it seems like you're not sure, I guess, if it's something that subconsciously happened, or if she was consciously trying to be like, is this real? Am I alive?
Yeah, well, I mean, like that leads into the where she actually has this, she falls asleep and has the sequence where she finds herself getting revenge on the photographer, which obviously we know she's been kind of feeling like she had bad feelings about, because the photographer was like kind of creepy and aggressive a little bit, but like whether she was going to kill him or not was something she doesn't know. But she, like, basically her anxieties are once again being expressed in these sort of dream sequences as she's having them, and but the actual sequence itself is fully realized by the film, where we get to see Mima dressed up as like a pizza guy and like stab him in the eye with a screwdriver, and then stab him through the dick with the screwdriver,
and then just do it over and over and over again after that. It's just pure anger.
And I love the images of sort of like the naked photos of her that she took, then covered in blood, as she's like murdering him and stabbing him over and over again, and she eventually wakes up and finds out that he was actually killed.
Yeah. And she finds the bloody stuff in her closet, so she's starting to think that these hallucinations are not fake.
Yeah, well, because like basically there is someone out there physically bringing her anxieties into, these internal anxieties into the real world. And she's like, is it me? Am I the one going crazy and not knowing what I'm physically doing anymore? And she literally even asks, like, am I alive? Maybe that truck will hit me and this is all a dream.
It's so dark.
Yeah. But, again, she starts seeing, even on set, when she's looking at a dead body on set that's clearly fake, she starts seeing the photographer and like faints into her bed. And eventually, over the course of the show, she's discovered to be the killer on the show. Right. And they say that, she's an unhinged dissociative personality disorder.
Yeah, they even do a cut to like, it's a moment where it's clear that she would go to somebody to talk out her thoughts, like to a therapist or something like that, and they cut to what is actually the show that she's working on, but she's speaking to somebody, and she's kind of like giving her advice as if she's going through like a session of some kind. And at first you're like, oh, she's getting help, that's great, and then you just realize, no, she's just on set again, and it's, she's just doing her job and digging the hole a little deeper. Yeah,
we're kind of repeating ourselves, but it can't be overstated just how how smoothly constructing that blending is between all of these different things that she's experiencing. Like it literally does become completely indistinguishable to the point where like, you can be convinced for like 20 seconds that you're watching a real scene. Then it's not.
It's in my notes. Like I'll be like, okay, she's going to a therapist now. Oh wait, no, she's actually on set. Like it happened a ton while I was taking notes. So yeah, they do a great job of that.
Yeah, and literally the therapist, I think, says to her at one point, like, there's no way illusions can come to life, like, stop dreaming, even though, like, she's literally being, like, haunted by, like, this ghost of, like, this previous version of herself that's literally, like, chasing her around. And and then they like wrap the show even at one point. They were like, it's kind of all over, and she calls the actress by her character name. They're like, that's over, man. That's not who I am. I'm not your therapist. I'm just another actress on the set. Like, I don't know what you're talking to me about. And there's a great cut from the fan grabbing her in the hallway when she's alone, and the manager like slamming the trunk of the car. And the fan just like assaulting her at sort of like knife point, yelling that he's, I'm protecting Mima. And she's like, but I'm Mima. And he also lets slip a really interesting detail that he's been receiving emails saying that like you're the fake imposter, like ruining her life and everything like that, as he tries to, assault her and, like sexually assault her and also stab her and all these different things. And
right. So in a way, he's also been kind of fucked with. Not that there's any excuse for his behavior, but no, it's just interesting. But yeah, he's going through kind of like not as extreme, but similar delusions based on somebody that is, contriving these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely someone set the literal stage for this altercation to take place that they are having it on. And it's a complete recreation of the one that happens that she's shooting. But this time around, she gets to hit him in the head, hit him in the skull with the hammer. And I do love this sort of like, she's like got this really heavy breathing, and there's this quiet image of his corpse, and everything's kind of, everything's disappeared because this is like something that's happened for real. And then she sees the crowd of the crew cheering for her instead of an empty studio. And they're like, yeah, good job, Mima. Like, you fucked him up. You want to rap. Great scene.
Yeah. And then doesn't she like wake up in her apartment after that again? Mm-hmm. So you have these just once again, layers and layers of like a dream world or reality where you're just never quite sure, even after something as aggressive as that attempted rape scene and hitting someone in the head. And I think even the hammer sticks out of his head and everything like that too. You're just jumped right back into questioning your own reality. It's great.
Yeah, that stuff is all super strong, and I think works really well when it does pivot into its big twist where the manager roomie takes her back to what she thinks is her room. But one of my favorite elements of this is that they actually set it up for you to know that that's actually not her room, because earlier in the film her fish die, and she also takes down the poster of her girl group.
Yep.
And in this new version of her room where she comes back, she notices that the fish are alive and that her poster that she took down is on the wall, and that she opens up her window and finds out that she's in the wrong part of Tokyo. And it turns out that the deranged fan was actually her agent or her manager this entire time.
Yeah.
Who was like a former pop star, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think she was someone who was a pop star and managed and, possibly had the same experience happen to her or something like that, which is, she was trying to basically manage her career for her. And she was the one definitely the most upset
with the
for her
scene.
As these, during the rape scene and she was the one who told her not to do it in the first place. And, she again, you have two different versions of people trying to protect her. And you had the fan who was trying to protect her, and you had her who was trying to protect her, and they just completely collapse into one another.
It's like interesting that like Rumi introduces Mima to the website in the first place.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely. Yeah, it makes
especially when you find out that she's been emailing the fan as Mima.
Yeah,
being like, I'm the real Mima, and this one is like is tarnishing our reputation. Like, you need to fuck with her, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
she sees it as saving her, and it's really sad in that sense too, because you do feel like Rumi at least in the first half when she's present, and we don't know that she's,
she like seems to care for Mima.
Yeah, it's just that, she just didn't channel it in the most
she also
way.
thinks she is Mima.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too. She's got a little bit of a complication there too. Absolutely.
Well, it's like the Pumpkin thing where she wants to be Mima.
Yeah.
But and what's so complicated about that though is that like we are already primed to like completely sympathize with how she feels because it's how Mima feels internally. She just doesn't really express it. But again, she's having the same, questions that, Rumi is having, but Rumi doesn't see it that way. And so, her version of how to solve this is not to talk to her, but to whip out the ice pick, Giallo style. And, she's the one doing the fan site running. She's the one emailing the psycho fan.
I love the cross
she's
between
the one,
the fantasy and reality slasher element where you still see when the big chase happens, the pop star chasing her and floating as if she's like this superhero kind of thing. But then when she passes a window and sees the reflection, it's actually Rumi like sprinting at the as fast as she possibly
full
can.
ugly, sweaty, bloody hysteria, just like sprinting like crazy. I love that aspect because again, it's showing sort of like this projected image of yourself versus like the real thing, right?
Right, exactly.
But that's even taking place like in the actual, suspense sequencing and action sequencing of this finale.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like Mima actually is still seeing that in a sense, like still seeing her past self chase her, even though at this point she would see the physical Rumi there. It's great.
Yeah, well, because when she tears the wig off of her in the big finale, that actually ruins the illusion for her, and she no longer sees herself as Mima. She sees herself as herself, and then as a result, she falls and like basically
she like impales herself.
She basically like she kills herself or guts herself on like a broken mirror, which is obviously like a great sort of poetic image to the all the different sort of reflections and cameras and screens and things that we've seen throughout to literally have her try to kill herself on a mirror, and then pull back and try to kill herself via truck, which is also something that Mima said earlier. And the way that she holds her arms out at the truck lights, like she's like their stage spotlights and stuff, like all of those images are just really fantastic.
Yeah. And you even see like the lights as they're approaching, you start to hear like applause and adoring fans and all of that, which I thought was just a cool little thing.
That stuff's great, and that image of Mima looking at herself maniacally smiling and like bleeding everywhere, and then deciding to basically prevent her past self from being killed. And again, like that stuff where she's like literally engaging with an image of herself and being hunted and tried to be killed by herself and then saving herself. All of that stuff is like really, really strong, and that's the big finale for the film. And also I do appreciate that, despite the fact that there's a lot of really interesting sort of like ideas at play, that this ending is just a huge, ridiculous giallo nonsense at the same time. Like I love that it's both of those things. Like all of it is there and it's built into the structure and the form of the film thematically. All of this, all of these qualities about identity and perception and how they relate to the industry of consumerism and voyeurism and everything, and that all is still there in this big finale, especially when you throw in the Hitchcock or De Palma psychodrama qualities and subjective qualities, and
like speaking of Hitchcock, they also do that thing where they go back to the institution after and kind of give like a little explanation of what was happening with Rumi, and I also really like that they give Mima like the that moment of clarity where she's like, I'm the real thing. Like I finally
it's like
seen
actually
myself.
like a positive ending. She like finally like sees herself. She like finally finds that like that's her identity. Like she knows who she is now.
Yeah, and it's great. And I think that's a great like I guess tie-in with kind of what the King of Comedy does too, where they go with the more lighthearted ending that I think is better suited to the characters that we've seen. I really didn't want I really did not want a tragic ending for her by the end of this. I was like, she's been through enough. Which is like something you would like expect, that she like kills Rumi or like she doesn't make it. Yeah. But like I think it's like almost like hopeful that she like finally finds out who she is at the end. Yeah.
Well,
definitely.
yeah, and she doesn't have like, you know, super bad feelings towards Rumi. She's like, yeah, you know, clearly she's kind of has this dissociative issue.
Yeah, like
but
Rumi
like, you know,
help.
she's in the right place for that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then and she feels good because she's like, because of her, I am 100% assured in actually like who I am now. You know, I'm not, you know, like basically this experience I was having internally that wouldn't have been her fault at all. It basically got a physical outlet through her, and now she has, you know, she has sort of like reclaimed some semblance of control over her own identity and image and everything like that. And yeah, so I think it's really kind of surprisingly positive and hopeful and kind of powerful ending for what is otherwise, you know, like 75 straight
really.
minutes of just like
anxiety.
assault.
Yeah, pure anxiety. Absolutely.
Yeah. But pivoting towards reductive rating round, I think here on Perfect Blue. I'm going to let you guys go first on this one because I'm kind of sitting on the fence on it. For you, Jamie.
Nice. I think for right now, I'm going to give it the old Jamie 4 trademark. I do think that classic. I do think that this could get the 5. I just, to be honest, it seemed like there were some familiar things in it, like some of the Giallo stuff. I just thought I have kind of seen before, but the way that they're applying it is very different. I like the way that they go in and out of reality and kind of the sets that she's working on. I think the way they do that is spectacular. I liked just to differentiate it from the King of Comedy. Like the King of Comedy has a lot of those diluted moments, but a lot of the time you at least know you're in those moments because it's just very obvious the way that Rupert is seeing them. Whereas this one just blends them into a point where you really get lost inside her head. And you yourself really don't know what's up and down. So I really appreciated that in regards to the film. So I think it could get there. I think the animation's fantastic. This is my first...
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, this is my first movie from him, so I also want to dive into a couple other things. Does he do mostly thriller and horror stuff? I saw one that I've been interested in that was called, I think, Tokyo Grandfather or something like that. Godfathers. And that one seemed more dramatic and kind of more like heartfelt and stuff.
Yeah, so. I've heard that one's more of a drama, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, cool.
I think he like delves into like different genres, but they're all like variations on like fantasy and like delving into like the blending of like reality and fiction.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think he does a great job
I definitely read that like that's his sort of pet theme. He really loved. I mean, he started it here, and it sounds like he never really left it. He just really loved this, you know, this psychodrama formal style that he kind of came up with, where he just blends all of these things to get into, you know, again, sort of get into these expressive worlds of these characters' internal lives. So that stuff's really strong. For you, Michael.
I'm gonna give it like the 5. I think it's like a really good movie. I like that it feels like De Palma by way of like Lynch. It reminds me a lot of like Inland Empire a lot, the way it like blends between like the reality of like what her life is like versus like how she's presenting herself on screen. I think it's like really hard not to like relate it to like being online, like being on Twitter, and like how dissociative it feels to like project like a certain version of yourself to like other people and like how people deal with you. I think it's like a really like prescient, like evergreen movie that I think like everybody should probably watch.
No, definitely. Yeah, I'm still on the fence, so I think I'm gonna sit with the Jamie 4 as well, which is it's the highest 4 that you can give.
Yes. Until maybe one day.
But yeah, I'm gonna give it another watch. I think I was just kind of overwhelmed on a first watch.
Sure.
Because it despite the fact that it's 80 minutes, it feels really, you know, sort of formally dense.
Oh yeah.
And there's so much that I feel like I knowing the destination, I would get out more of even the early scenes and have a firmer grasp of kind of like where we were. Even though again that feeling of being lost, I think does actually accentuate again what she is experiencing as well. But again, really gorgeous design work, really gorgeous, animation and drawing with really great perspective and color. Really, again, sharp and sort of elegant cutting that get you into this sort of fractured mind that she's having. Incredible, again, sort of incorporating the giallo elements and the Hitchcock elements, which together is basically just what De Palma was doing. I thought a lot about Body Double a little bit while I was watching this.
Yeah, I thought about De Palma a lot.
Especially as it gets into sort of like the industry elements, like again, this perception that surrounds media and constructed pop identity and everything. But then you throw in, the stan culture aspect and the rise of the internet and stalking and this never ending modern world of cameras and screens and reflections just surrounding this woman who's already having image issues, just accentuating them even more. Where in the minds of like the people who consume your art, you're kind of like owned by them. I think that stuff is all really fantastic, and I think you really get that, especially when everything starts to explode in the finale. And again, you get literal images of her being chased by a ghost of her former self that's like haunting her and trying to kill her and having to physically actually overcome that. And I think also, especially as it parallels to the idea of experience of honestly just being an actress.
Yeah.
Giving yourself to your art and reckoning with the fact that your art kind of has a life of its own. It takes on, that it takes on outside of your own body and into the minds of other people. I think that a lot of people have talked about how, they feel a loss of control over yourself and your identity and your body when that happens. Especially here, as it's even cynically thrown in that, there's perverted money men and screenwriters and fans and everyone who, feel like they have a piece of you.
Or the agent
so I feel like it's really interesting.
You could trust. I mean, it's the one person she thought she could, actually go to. And it's the one person throughout the movie that she actually expresses these feelings of not trusting herself and the reality around her. And Rumi, unfortunately, uses that
I want to
her.
go back. I want to go back with that in mind because they do layer in a history where she was a former pop star as well. And I want to see if I can catch more on that stuff and feel like if there was something to do with the fact that, she's also kind of gone through these experiences before and was trying to prevent them and, preserve this kind of innocence that she felt she lost herself and that kind of stuff. Cause like that's all kind of layered in there as well. And I do think it's nice that it does end on an eventual reclaiming of, control for Mima, despite all of the insanely ugly, gruesome psychodrama qualities that it takes on. Because we cannot overstate, this is a traumatizing film intentionally designed to be, again, very different than King of Comedy's more intentionally kind of locked down version. This movie goes for the throat.
Yeah, it's viscerally terrifying.
Yeah, it's very disturbing to watch. There's lots of scenes that I think people might struggle with if you struggle with this person losing control of their mind and body entirely to a bunch of various forces surrounding her. So yeah,
everyone's using her as the tool, basically.
Yeah, and just how, again, very much committing to, again, being inside that broken psyche for the entire time.
Yeah.
I think it was a very strong choice by him. And to also to completely reshape the material in that way. Like you have to have such confidence to do that, to be like, I see things I like in here, but here's the version of it that I think is more viscerally impactful.
Yeah, I'm so glad he got
I'd have to go back and read the original material to like see for sure, but I feel like it was the right choice.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I think that will wrap it up for Perfect Blue and for this week's episode. Once again, that was The King of Comedy from 1982 and Perfect Blue from 1997. Thanks so much, Michael, for joining us and for bringing these films with you. Is there anything that you would like to plug while you're here? Because if so, that's what we usually have, where we have you do that.
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm on at Sriracha Chau. It's SRI. SRIRACHACHAU. I'm under Mr. Chau. You can find me there. I'm usually posting about movies, but also like sometimes do cartoons. You can find me on there.
Perfect.
Hell yeah. For our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be over on the bonus feed over on the Patreon, where we are going to be going regional small town crime gone wrong. So, of course, we're going to be talking about the Coen Brothers, Blood Simple, 1984, their debut film.
Woo.
And then we're going to be pairing it with a very underseen and very underrated film called Sudden Fury from 1975, which is essentially the Ontario Canadian dad jeans version of a similar sort of story about a guy who is trying to perhaps get away with the murder of his wife, which is something that also happens in Blood Simple. But of course, lots of things go wrong, and they sort of, all the different characters have to logistically figure their way out of that. But I really wanted to talk about Blood Simple because it's been on my mind a lot since I watched it. And Sudden Fury was one I watched a couple, maybe even like 2 years ago or so now. But I went, man, that would go well with the Coens at some point. And It's also one of the rare movie that we talk about sometimes on the show where like less than like 1,000 people have logged it, I think.
Oh, so it's really rare. That's sweet. That's
really, really rare. Yeah, so we're going to be going underrated mode on that one. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be back with a special guest. We're going to be doing a crazy episode that I have no idea what to expect from because I haven't seen either film. We're going to be talking about The Discarnates, the 1988 film by Nobuhiko Obayashi, who we've only talked about once on this show. That's the filmmaker behind House from 1977.
Good Lord, this is going to be wild.
Yep. So we're going to be talking about The Discarnates, and then it is being paired with a film called Ghost Watch from 1992, directed by Leslie Manning. And I have no idea what the pairing is because I don't know. Maybe they both have something to do with ghosts.
I want to look up Ghost Watch for a minute. I might have recently watched that. I did. Ghost Watch is a banger. I'm very excited to talk about that. It kind of does this, like, they think it's like a TV show and just this normal ghostly investigation, and then it kind of takes a turn. So, yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. Well, I am very excited to do that with a special guest in 2 weeks' time.
Perfect.
But yes, that being said, I think that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.